Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Godlike Naruto is Blake's brother. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Soul Winterfang 71 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Everything was quiet, deathly so. The streets were empty of other life forms. Inoperable vehicles flipped over and wrecked all along each stretch of building-flanked road. Bullet holes and scorch marks littered the concrete surfaces everywhere in varying degrees. Small ones from pistol-type weaponry, large ones from artillery-based cannons, wide sprays of dozens of holes from assault rifles, clusters of larger ones from shotguns, deeply penetrating ones from sniper rifles, debris scattered from explosions. Fires still burned in various areas, remnants of vehicular fuel supplying them, or the structures some of them burned within doing the same. The battle had ended not too long ago, maybe by a few hours, and yet he hadn't run across a single corpse, human or otherwise. There was no point in trying the radio. The communication towers and relay stations were the first to be taken out. The enemy had struck fast and hard, taking out their communications first, and then sealing off their escape routes, specifically, destroying their pelicans and other forms of aerial and exoatmospheric transportation. His handler had thrown him into a room and sealed the blast door to ensure that at least one person survived to tell the tale. Not much of a tale to tell, really. It was no different than their other battles. Still, he knew what had attacked the UNSC base. The Spartan looked up silently as a Covenant Type 52 troop carrier, also known as a Phantom, flew overhead, seemingly oblivious to the lone super soldier. Unlike other Spartans, he was clad in a much heavier suit of Mjolnir armor than the standard issue Mark 6 and its variants. When he had been issued the suit shortly after completing his training, his handler had said it was a suit of Mjolnir Mark 7 445 super wide armor, though it had a special designation unique to it. Olympus. He also discovered that he had been bred specifically for the suit, being the sole Spartan 6 to not only survive the unique surgical and biochemical procedures out of a little under 40 applicants, but also because there had only been one Olympus suit ever made. Had the other survived, the one to gain the Olympus suit would have been made commander over the small company of Spartan VIs. From what his handler had told him in the past, they had already been planning on appointing that position to him from the very start due to his uniqueness. Apart from being far more heavily armored and weighing in at 0.75 tons, roughly 1,500 pounds, the Olympus suit was aesthetically similar to the standard Mark V Mjolnir suit, weighing in a little under 300 pounds on his own. The Spartan's weight combined with the weight of his armor put him at an approximate total weight of 1,800 pounds. So much weight would have slowed other Spartans down to a brisk lumbering gait from the suit's incredible mass. But he had been bred to be stronger than previous Spartan generations. Thus, he was able to run while wearing the suit, but he could only reach a maximum speed of 21.6 miles per hour on his own power without injuring himself. From what his handler had told him, it was actually faster than what they had originally estimated, which had only been an average of 15 miles per hour without causing injury. The suit was painted a glossy jet black, the helmet bearing a mirrored and polarized ocean blue sliver of a visor that ran across his eyes from one temple to the other. The left side of his armored chest bore the numeric designation 419 in white. The armor covering his upper body was much heavier and bulkier than standard Mjolnir armor, the collar rising up a few inches along the back and sides to better protect his neck with an armored lip in the front about where his chin would be. His biceps were encased with a light armor shell while a broad shield-like plate was mounted to the bands, allowing the thick plates to completely cover his biceps and shoulders without limiting his arms' range of motion. His forearms and hands were heavily plated as well, with only his index fingers and thumbs left unarmored to keep from interfering with any gun he used, while the rest of his fingers were lightly plated with more of the black metal. His helmet was slightly bulkier than normal from thicker armor plating and more devices built into it, most of them being sensors and communications devices. The heavier-than-normal armor around his midsection, waist, and legs left few weak spots where his black undersuit was exposed without limiting his range of motion too much outside of the suit's immense bulk and weight, allowing him the base movements of any other Spartan. He also had more magnetic strips built into his armor to carry more things such as more ammunition, multiple large weapons, extra equipment, and so on. If other Spartans were sometimes referred to as living tanks by Marines and ODSTs, the Olympus-clad Spartan was a mobile monolith of war, and had repeatedly proven himself as such in the brief 2 years he had been active. We should get moving. His AI partner commented from within his heavily plated shell of a helmet. Despite the visor's abundance of physical blind spots, special sensors built into the helmet and parts of his suit filled in those areas with holographic outlines of every discernible object within his field of view. He could see even the ants crawling across the ground in his blind spots with the HUD's automated zoom-in/out feature that linked with his eyes via the Spartan neural interface that had been surgically implanted in the back of his head as a child. Unlike the simpler version used all throughout the UNSC, his HUD was a little more unique, feeding him data on numerous things tied in with the suit, and even more things that the suit's sensors automatically scanned. It had been severely disorienting when he had first put it on. Without showing any sign of him even hearing what his AI partner had said, the heavily armored Spartan started walking again. His standard issue M739 saw light machine gun grasped firmly in his armor-plated hands as he gradually sped up into a slow jog. His footfalls were like mountains crashing together, the shallowest of indentations of his plated footprints left behind in the asphalt as it cracked slightly from the sheer weight concentrated into singular points upon its surface with each hasty step. Since his AI partner had tagged one of the Sanghaili zealots aboard the Covenant Phantom as it passed overhead, he knew their goal wasn't too far from his position, 165 meters from his current position and steadily declining. There's a break in the overpass up ahead, his AI informed him, making the Spartan narrow his eyes slightly before immediately issuing the subconscious mental command to his armor through the interlinked subsystems of his undersuit and armor via his S&I. Immediately, the thrusters built into his armor behind his shoulders warmed up in preparation along with a couple smaller ones scattered across his heavily armored frame. Reaching the edge of the broken bridge, the Spartan jumped as high as his armor would allow while the thrusters fired at full power, carrying him across the 30-foot gap to the other end of the bridge. He was airborne for less than 3 seconds before he touched back down quite heavily on the other side. The Spartan left hunched forward slightly from the weight shift of his momentum being abruptly halted while the thruster jets returned to their inactive states. Upon reconnecting with the ground, the shock absorbers scattered throughout his suit soaked up the kinetic energy of the impact before using that same energy to replenish any lost energy in the suit's fusion cells, its primary source of power. So long as it was in constant use, the Olympus suit's fusion cells would last almost 2 to 3 times longer than those that powered other Mjolnir armor models. Only a second after impact, the lone Spartan 6 was mobile again, saw still cradled in his hands. The only sound in the immediate area was the Spartan's own thundering footfalls as he jogged down the road in the direction of his current objective, 1 to 1 meters from target. ETA 4-5 seconds. The AI vocalized despite the information being displayed on the Spartan's HUD. Not even 20 seconds later, he encountered enemy resistance. He didn't even blink as he backhanded a lunging Covenant Spec Ops Sanghaili elite with his left hand, an energy sword grasped in the alien's right hand. Wielding his saw with only his right hand, the Spartan kept running, mowing down the Covenant forces that got caught in his path with bursts of armor-piercing rounds that he had been issued to go with his weapon. He had been meant to be both an immovable object and an unstoppable force, though the cost for him and the suit alone was greater than the cost of 4 Spartan versus and their armor together. Thus, he was the only one, both because he had been the lone survivor of the failed Spartan 6 program's augmentations and also due to the Spartan 6 program's incredibly high cost. Jumping up and swatting an elite ranger out of the air when it tried to avoid being crushed under the stampeding Spartan's feet by taking to the air with its jetpack, the black-armored super soldier continued on his charge without even breaking stride. Plasma shots splashed against his heavy-duty shielding, gradually wearing it down, but the kinetic energy built up from his run was already charging up the auxiliary shields, which would buy him enough time for his primary shields to recharge. Jumping up slightly again, the Spartan crushed the front end of a Covenant Ghost under one armor-encased foot, shooting the Ungoi grunt driving it as he landed on the Type 32 rapid assault vehicle. With his next step, he touched back down on the ground just beyond the wrecked hovercraft, and kept running, 6-1 meters from target. ETA 2-2 seconds. His AI intoned as the Spartan decimated the crowd of Ungoi grunts, just ahead of him with his weapon while grabbing another Sanghaili by its throat in his left hand, crushing its neck with one full-strength squeeze before throwing it out in front of him, effectively blocking the acidic green projectile of a hunter's fuel rod assault cannon. Raising his saw after reloading it with a fresh drum mag, the Spartan didn't give them Galekalo the chance to charge up another shot, immediately opening fire on the 5-ton collection of worm-like creatures and heavy armor plating. Taking too many hits, the hunter was unable to move in time to avoid the shoulder check to its side that was strong enough to knock it over and through the wall beside it, though the Spartan still stumbled slightly from the impact due to the hunter's considerable weight. The Spartan didn't hesitate in the slightest as he was faced with a reinforced concrete wall in front of him. His target was just beyond it, emptying the last of the rounds his rifle currently possessed into the wall ahead of him. The Spartan reloaded his saw just in time to shoulder charge the damaged section of the wall, busting his way through. It was only then that he came to a stop, finding the target of the Covenant's interest. An active piece of Forerunner technology. It appeared as a 10-foot diameter ring of silvery metal with a fiery orange energy lining the black void that filled in the space inside the ring, looking like a portal of some sort. Before the 5 Sanghaili zealots in the room could react to his presence, the Spartan had already raised his saw once more and opened fire on them, taking 2 down before the remaining 3 charged him with their energy swords. The third and closest zealot was mowed down at point-blank range before the Spartan used his rifle to deflect the fourth weapon to the side, only to drive his shoulder into the Sanghaili's chest and knock him back. He then used his rifle like a blunt weapon, bashing the 5th zealot in the side of its head hard enough to knock it to the floor before shooting and killing the split-jawed alien. When the 4th got back up and lunged at him again, the Spartan turned to the side to avoid the lunging stab, only to drop his elbow onto the Sanghaili's back, sending the zealot crashing to the floor. Without a word or the slightest bit of hesitation, the Spartan lifted his left foot before stomping down on the zealot's helmeted head, crushing the armor-shelled item and its contents like a rotten melon. "Must you be so brutal?" His AI questioned apathetically, but their question was ignored as the Spartan stepped toward the Forerunner artifact that was surrounded by UNSC sensors and other such scientific tools, reloading his saw before mounting it to his back as he moved closer. "What is this?" the Spartan finally inquired, mostly just thinking out loud while glancing to the side and spotting the hollow tank pedestal with a computer set beside it. Before his AI partner could answer the question, the Spartan reached up and retrieved the data crystal chip from the back of his helmet before slipping the card into the appropriate slot on the pedestal. A moment later, the AI's avatar formed in dark red light. A young woman made of bright red light bearing dark red technological markings all over her form. Her wavy waist-length hair cascading down her back and down in front of her shoulders while some of her chin-length bangs fell in front of her left eye. She was clad in a traditional Japanese yukata that was a similar shade of red as her body, the obi sash around her waist being about the same dark shade as the markings decorating her face and hands. "Kurama," the Spartan murmured, his tone being all the AI needed to know what the Spartan wanted. "Just a moment, Naruto." Kurama responded almost casually as she started accessing the isolated UNSC database that had been devoted solely to the Forerunner artifact. She had been designed to hack computer systems of all forms to gather intelligence on enemy movements, as well as assist in learning their technology, namely, the Covenant's technology. Not only that, but Kurama was a very calculative and primarily strategic thinking smart AI meant for combat, the only AI the Spartan 6 program had been able to get a hold of, at that. It was through her that her Spartan partner was able to access the full potential of his Olympus armor even though he was fully capable of operating it without her. It seems to be a portal of some kind, but it's not to another location on this planet, or any other in this system, for that matter, Kurama explained, though she sounded just as confused and uncertain as Naruto was by her response. "Then where does it lead to?" The Olympus-clad Spartan, Naruto, asked calmly, yet firmly as he narrowed his eyes at the portal from within his helmet. "I don't understand," Kurama mumbled, mostly to herself as she kept sifting through files and data. "It doesn't lead anywhere. That's impossible." The Spartan countered. "A portal is a gateway, a door. Every door leads to something, Kurama, no matter how minor or insignificant it may seem. But that's just it, Naruto." Kurama continued, still going through the wealth of information, explaining as she went. "Apparently it leads to here, except the data must be wrong. That simply can't be." "What can't be?" Naruto questioned as he heard something outside, instantly turning around and aiming his rifle towards the door he had put in the wall minutes ago. "We're running out of time, Kurama." "I understand, Naruto. I'm using the security cameras to keep an eye on everything," Kurama remarked before answering the Spartan's previous question. "It's simply not possible, but the portal leads back to here in the past. At least, that's what I understand from the data on the artifact's energy readings." "Anything else?" Naruto questioned while taking a knee, shouldering his rifle. He could see quite a number of Covenant troops gathering further down the road he had come from, too many for him to repel with him being so limited on ammunition and equipped with only one weapon. That left two options. 1. Make a final stand and kill as many Covenant troops as he could before they eventually managed to take him down, or 2. Find a way off the planet. Kurama seemed to read his mind, becoming fully aware of the amassing enemy forces outside via the security cameras. "I believe this is one of those times that we must take a leap of faith, as it is sometimes said," Kurama remarked from her spot, downloading all of the information on the Forerunner artifact that she could find. "Quickly, Naruto. I have a feeling I might regret this in the near future." The Spartan mused to himself for a moment before standing back up fully and retrieving Kurama, setting her back in her spot on the back of his helmet. As a burst of plasma shots struck his shields along his left side and shoulder, Naruto turned around and gunned down the Kigyar jackal that had shot him. Using his free left hand, he reached behind his waist and retrieved the Havoc nuclear warhead he had collected earlier. He had figured he wasn't going to be leaving the planet alive and decided to take the nuke, just to take out as many Covenant with him when he finally fell. "If this is what you say it is, then we need to make sure the Covenant doesn't ever get their hands on it," Naruto pointed out, already starting to type in the activation codes to arm the bomb before setting the timer, especially since they're getting desperate now that we're starting to win. "My thoughts exactly, Naruto," Kurama commented in full agreement as the blonde armed the nuke and set the 30-megaton warhead on the computer desk. A second later, a heavy burst of plasma shots sprayed him from the hole in the wall. Turning towards it, Naruto unloaded his saw in their direction while reaching behind his waist with his left hand again. Grabbing his only 2 grenades, he pressed the time-release detonators and tossed them through the hole, both explosive orbs bouncing to either side of the doorway while the Spartan unloaded the last of the rounds in his gun into the chest of a Sangaili zealot that rushed him, with twin energy swords, but it wasn't enough to kill it. 7 seconds until detonation. "Get in the portal," Kurama urgently reminded, her voice taking on a slightly anxious tone. "I'm a little busy here." The Spartan growled as he dropped his useless weapon since he didn't have another drum mag for it, idly noting the apparent abundance of Sangaili armed with energy swords. Honestly, he found it a bit ironic. The first Sangaili he encountered on the battlefield had been armed with an energy sword, and now what was quite possibly the last one he would fight was also armed with the plasma blades. Catching the zealot's hands at the wrists and holding them out to the sides to keep from getting hit with the split-jawed alien's weapons, Naruto was about to go on the offensive when the zealot kicked him in the stomach, stumbling him back a couple steps despite his incredible bulk. When the zealot lunged at him again, Naruto kicked the maroon-armored Sangaili in the chest, knocking himself off balance while the zealot was launched back out the hole in the wall. As he fell back, He felt a certain weightlessness while passing through the Forerunner ring, and then absolute agony filled his mind and body, unable to even scream as his vision went blinding white. Everything then went black a second later. As it timed out, the Havoc warhead detonated, wiping out virtually everything within a 1.6-kilometer radius, the strange Forerunner portal ring included. In 2589, the UNSC returned to Reach. By 2592, it was back to full military strength and rebuilt. By 2593, for a second time, the once reclaimed planet of Reach fell to the Covenant Empire when they broke the peace treaty between them and the UNSC, but not without the last Spartan on the planet destroying what they sought, just to spite them. XXX, from the beginning you know the end. For some reason, that quote kept echoing in his head. What was stranger was the fact that some of his few memories as a child had started to play out in his head, recalling what little he could remember of his mother. Her long dark auburn red hair, her dark indigo blue eyes, her pale cream-colored skin. Many times he wondered what it would be like if he took after his mother's looks. But he took after his father, having sun-kissed blonde hair and naturally tan skin. Luckily, he still had his mother's dark blue eyes that were damn near violet instead of his father's lighter ocean sky blue. Because both of his parents had been Spartan Iverses, he had no other choice than to become a part of the Spartan program as a very young child. Sometimes, that's what Naruto thought it was that determined his survival of the Spartan 6 augmentation procedures when exactly 37 other applicants died from the series of surgeries alone. It had made for a very lonely and harsh time for him, being the only one going through the rigors of Spartan 6 training and undergoing missions on his own. He hadn't really spent much time working with other Spartans, usually doing solo operations. After completing his training 2 years ago and joining the active Spartan ranks, Naruto had been given full possession of the lone Mjolnir Mark 7 445 super wide Olympus suit. What struck him as odd, however, was when he had been given his AI partner, Kurama, just 6 months ago. Normally, a Spartan wouldn't receive a smart AI partner until they had reached a certain rank. Still, if it hadn't been for Kurama, Naruto believed he just might have died at some point during the past 3 months while fighting back against the Covenant's second invasion of Reach. Now, only 16 years old, the 7-foot-tall Spartan had been active since he was 14, only 2 years before Reach had been invaded again. The second battle for the planet had lasted 3 months. During those 3 months, he had reclaimed nearly half of the high-priority areas on Reach lost to the Covenant's initial assault when the second invasion began. But he and the UNSC forces with him had been cut off from reinforcements, and surrounded by their alien enemy. They had been forced to fall back to the rebuilt sword base, something the Spartan found kind of ironic considering the last time Reach had been invaded. That was when his handler and only friend had sacrificed their life to make sure he lived. He wasn't going to disappoint her. Yuto! Naruto, wake up! Kurama yelled in his ears frantically, the Spartan still feeling that weightless sensation as he grit his teeth in pain. Now's not the time to feel pain, soldier. Sit rep. Naruto grunted out through clenched teeth, forcing back the agony burning in his muscles and coursing through his veins. Whatever that portal had done, it hurt like a bitch on a bad day. It had also gotten Kurama worked up into a frenzy, something he hadn't yet experienced of the normally calculating and seemingly apathetic smart AI. Before she could even start to answer him, Naruto learned what was going on the hard way. As the altimeter subsystem in his suit registered the Spartan's rapid angular descent that would come to an abrupt end in only a handful of seconds, the armor-lock subsystems engaged while his shields kicked into overdrive. Drawing on the suit's auxiliary power cells kept charged through its kinetic motors to layer a second shield over the first for added protection. Fuck was all he managed to get out before. Thump! Impact. Nearly 2,000 pounds of heavy armor and augmented human flesh hit the ground like a meteor of black metal, putting a decently sized shallow crater in the earth from the collision. It was silent for several seconds as the thick dust clouds slowly started to settle. Sucking in a deep gasping breath as the armor locks deactivated, Naruto grabbed his helmet with both hands and ripped it off despite the painful protest of his body. Half rolling to his hands and feet, Naruto desperately worked on refilling his lungs with oxygen amongst his heavy coughing and gasping. It took a minute before he was breathing properly again, albeit a little heavily. No more portals. Naruto groaned quietly between ragged gasping breaths as he put his helmet back on with some reluctance and tipped over onto his side, letting his still aching body rest for a few moments. Never again. Agreed. Kurama responded as she regained her usual calm and cool demeanor. After a few minutes of laying there in relative silence with the exception of the quiet pings and bleeps inside of his helmet from Kurama running diagnostics on his armor and its many subsystems, Naruto finally forced himself back up on his feet, suppressing another quiet groan as his muscles and bones protested. So, you said that portal was some kind of time machine? Naruto questioned while taking inventory of what he had left. Something that was relatively easy thanks to his armor and HUD. No ammunition, no grenades, only a couple high-calorie ration bars, a couple flares, and his combat knife, which was sheathed on his left shoulder. No guns. To an extent, yes. Kurama responded while Naruto accessed the global positioning locator via his HUD, which had a pre-downloaded global map of every known planet from his time, and used it to give him an idea of his current location, if at all possible. While he did that, Kurama continued. Now that we are not in any immediate danger for the moment, I can now examine the information we collected more thoroughly. That's odd. What's odd? Naruto questioned a little suspiciously, though he was a bit confused by his own investigations. Not only did none of the maps have a match to the topographical scans his suit had taken automatically during his fall, but his suit's sensors weren't picking up any kind of signal even remotely close to anything used by the UNSC or the Covenant. Nothing. Something that made Naruto's eyes narrow slightly as he contemplated the potential consequences of going through the portal after the discovery of such revelations. Well, it says here that the Forerunner builder that was creating the portal had been tampering with an innovation upon early Forerunner slipspace technology. In essence, he was creating a sort of long-distance teleporter that could cross the galaxy instantaneously. Kurama went on to explain. However, it seems the portal was deemed a failure and sealed away when the builder used the portal as a demonstration, only to vanish. The Forerunner documentation says the builder was never seen again after that. I'm assuming the Covenant somehow found out about the portal's existence, and were probably going to somehow use it against the UNSC, not knowing that it was a failed experiment. I wouldn't exactly call it a failure, Naruto remarked haphazardly, getting silence from his AI partner in response. Undoubtedly, the AI was partly confused by the remark, "We're still alive." Yes, well, there's more. Kurama responded a little cautiously, making Naruto's eyes narrow slightly with suspicion once more. I don't believe we just went back in time, if we even did at all. Explain. Naruto ordered quietly, making his displeasure of Kurama's cryptic responses clear to the AI. Now was not the time for her usual vague dialogue. I believe we might have crossed into a parallel dimension of some sort. Kurama answered bluntly, getting a heavy sigh from Naruto. Things were never simple whenever he got involved. Never. Let me guess. That's why my GPS isn't able to pinpoint my location, and why I'm not picking up any UNSC or Covenant communication transmissions, and let's not forget the fact that there is probably no way back to where we came from. Naruto remarked a bit sarcastically, though a small part in the back of his mind wondered if he even wanted to go back. All that awaited him back there was just war and death. Most likely, yes. However, I don't think it's quite that simple. Kurama responded before the HUD on the inside of the helmet started displaying some of the information the AI had gathered for Naruto to examine himself, only it had been condensed and simplified into a legible format for the Spartan. It did nothing to alleviate the Spartan 6's mild annoyance and ignorance of the situation's full weight. Kurama noticed and decided to further simplify her explanation. I don't believe it was our physical selves that were transferred by the portal. Not exactly. Much like the Forerunner composer, I believe the portal digitized our essence and transferred us to a parallel dimension of sorts. Upon arrival, a temporary reversal portal formed and remade our physical selves within the same general time frame that our forms were composed by the primary portal we passed through back on reach. Regardless of whether that's true or not, what do we do now? Naruto questioned, nearly getting confused by Kurama's summary of recent events. Metaphysics was something he didn't know much about, and didn't exactly plan on learning. He was a soldier, plain and simple. Not a scientist. We're in unknown territory in a completely different dimension. The only form of defense I have is my knife and hand-to-hand skills, no way to contact anyone, and no idea on whether this planet is even inhabited by intelligent life, let alone other humans or at least alien life forms that don't immediately want to kill me. Well, I'm picking up a signal of some kind due north of us. It's coming from a rather long distance from us, but it's a start. Kurama informed her partner. I can't tap into it because of its strange frequency makeup, but it seems human in origin, so maybe we got lucky. I can't pinpoint the source's exact location, but it should be about a 2-day trek if we don't stop. We? Naruto growled under his breath, his AI partner staying silent at the Spartan's irritated inquiry. Naruto couldn't help sighing in annoyance as he started walking in the direction Kurama had pointed him in, glaring out in front of him at nothing in particular. I really hate portals. XXX. Back. The fuck up. Naruto snarled out of frustration, punctuating his words with a punch to the large bear-like creature's body that knocked it back a couple steps every time. Cocking his right hand back, Naruto let his fist fly forward with as much strength as he was able to pack into it, smashing the bone-masked black monster against the thick tree before sending the creature through the tree. Panting slightly as he watched the bear-like beast slowly dissolve and evaporate into black smoke while the tree fell to the side, Naruto slowly looked down at his right hand. That had been a stronger punch than he recalled being capable of. Sure, he'd done similar things to Sangaili elites, putting them through walls, but the bear creature was the size of a hunter and probably weighed about a quarter of one, putting it in the same general weight class as himself with his armor. Kurama, what is going on? Naruto questioned a bit cautiously while staring down at his right hand as if it were an unknown entity. I don't know. The gravity isn't that much different from Earth's, but Kurama started answering before trailing off for a few seconds. I'm picking up a strange energy reading that's coming from inside your body, Naruto. I can't identify it or even give you a guess as to what it is, but the energy reading is steadily getting stronger, but it's slow going at the moment. Could it be some kind of radiation poisoning from the portal? Naruto questioned, honestly feeling a little nervous now that he was aware of an unknown energy signature building up inside of his own body. I don't think it's radiation, but I think it does have something to do with the portal. The one we came out of, specifically, Kurama answered, her words doing little in terms of settling the Spartans' concerns. The energy seems to be helping you, though. The minor fractures in your ribs from hitting the ground earlier are almost non-existent now, and there's virtually no bruising at all. Not only that, but it's been reacting with your emotions whenever you get attacked by one of those creatures. I think that's why you're hitting harder than usual. Great, now, I'm turning into some kind of weird superhero character, just great. Naruto growled under his breath as he started walking north again, having already been traveling for a good 20 hours so far and encountered over 24 of the weird bone mass creatures. Bear types, werewolf-looking types, bird types, a giant scorpion type, and even a few giant double-headed snake creatures. So what else is there? Let me guess. I can fly now. Shoot laser beams from my eyes or something? There's no need for sarcasm. I'm just telling you what I'm discovering as I'm discovering it. Kurama retorted a bit irritably herself. And no, you can't fly or shoot laser beams from your eyes. Whatever the energy is, it's not causing any kind of problems. From the looks of it, it's only amplifying what you already have: speed, strength, endurance, durability, and apparent self-healing ability. Honestly, I won't know for sure until I can get access to some kind of database or a computer with access to the information I need. This is getting ridiculous. Naruto muttered under his breath, referring to the situation he was stuck in because the Covenant didn't even know how to pretend to be friendly with humans. Sure, there was neutrality between them for a little while, but there had never been actual peace. First, Reach is lost and everyone is killed. Then, I get sent to another dimension because of a piece of broken Forerunner technology, and then I find out that there's some kind of weird energy building up inside of my body. What's next? Animal people? Sakura was right. Kurama mumbled in response to her partner's behavior. You get cranky when you're confused or stressed out. Shut up, the 16-year-old Spartan 6 grunted out at his AI companion. X. Man, why do they bother sticking us up here? One of the two Vale soldiers complained. I mean, they've got those automated turrets from Atlas set up all along the wall to take care of any Grim that try to get through, so why are we here? Do you ever stop whining? The other soldier murmured. Just as the first one was about to retort, a Beowulf burst out from the tree line 100 meters out from the towering defensive wall that encircled Vale. Except, it was flying through the air backwards. Recognizing the Grim as a threat, the nearby turrets automatically targeted the beast and opened fire, the heavy caliber rounds tearing the beast apart within seconds. What the? Look! The first soldier called out while pointing back towards the forest just in time for one of the trees to fall over and another Beowulf to fly out from the tree line in the same manner the first one had. Like its predecessor, the second Leakin-like Grim was shredded by the turret's gunfire. What the hell is going on down there? I have no idea, the second soldier mumbled while they both watched a third Beowulf get sent straight up into the air, making it an easy target for the turrets to tear into before it could make it halfway back to the ground. They then heard the enraged howl of a Beowulf Alpha seconds before watching it come crashing through the forest. Backwards, as it hit the ground and tumbled, a small black figure broke free of the beast and made contact with the ground a dozen meters away from it just as the turrets opened fire on the Alpha. Wait, someone's down there! How the hell did they get outside the wall, and what the hell are they doing out there? I don't know, but we need to get a bullhead out here immediately. The first one exclaimed as he rushed to call for an airship to save the heavily armored man beyond the wall. Fucking mongrel, Naruto growled under his breath as he pushed himself back to his feet, glaring at the dismantled and dissolving remains of the giant wolf beast that had been killed by the defensive turrets lining the wall. Seeing as how the guns hadn't opened fire on him yet, the turrets seemed to recognize him as a friendly. That meant there were other humans. Or so he hoped. Hey! Don't worry. We've got a bullhead on its way to pick you up. Someone called down to him from the top of the 400-foot-high wall of steel and stone. Instead of yelling back up at the man, Naruto simply waved his hand over his head to signal that he had heard the man. What the hell is a bullhead? He mumbled quietly to himself, but he figured he'd find out soon enough. Chapter 2. Alright. That should do it, he mumbled quietly to himself as he picked up the last piece of armor he had been working on. Slipping the armored bracer over his hand and forearm, he hit the hidden activation switch, causing the metal object to contract and conform to his forearm as if the metal armor was physically bound to his body. The moment it was locked in place, metal pieces shot out from around the wrist to encase his hand in more of the black armor plating. The entire item instantly adhered itself to his bodysuit to keep from moving out of place. In less than a second, the armor piece was fully deployed and working just as well as it had when he had first started experimenting with Remnant's unusual foldable technology, as they called it. While he was still working on an alternative power supply for his Olympus armor, Naruto had also built a handful of dust-compatible devices into his armor, and had even built himself a couple weapons to use in combat, but he had taken to relying on his hand-to-hand skills when faced with human and faunus opponents. He was just glad that Kurama had a library's worth of data on all of the UNSC's technology that covered everything from his armor to vehicles to weapons. Using Kurama's extensive stored data on UNSC technology, he had been able to reconstruct a select few weapons he was familiar with and had the most experience in using, a couple of his new weapons having some rather interesting secondary functions built into them. So, what do you plan on doing now, Naruto? Kurama spoke up, her 5-inch-tall avatar of red light appearing over her data crystal chip, which sat on the workbench Naruto had been sitting at a moment ago. You've finished upgrading the Olympus suit. You've even anonymously had a couple harmless little inventions patented for income. Why not take up that man's offer? It'll get you out of this dump and it'll keep you busy. No, Naruto responded quietly, yet sharply as he took the armored gauntlet off and set it with the rest of the Olympus suit's pieces. He had been forced into reverse engineering almost the entire set of armor, replacing certain components with others to make it easier to put the armor on or take it off without needing any special machinery like they did back home. Decorating the Olympus suit's left shoulder armor was the ivory mark of the Forerunner Reclaimer symbol, all UNSC-related markings having been removed prior to its application. And just why not? Kurama returned with a slight glare aimed at the Spartan. Are you seriously going to let your skills stagnate and diminish simply because there's no one giving you orders anymore? Just because there isn't another war for you to fight in? That's enough, Kurama, he murmured quietly while sparing a glance at the full-body mirror propped against the wall off to the side of the small warehouse-like structure he had been living in and working out of since he had arrived in Vale a year ago. He had kept his naturally shaggy golden blonde hair in the same undershave he'd always had it in, with the thin and tightly bound ponytail stopping at the base of his neck. His skin was a natural light tan and his eyes a dark blue that were almost purple in color, a scar crossing over the bridge of his nose and across his left cheek to his jawline, a parting gift given to him by the energy sword of the first Sangaili he had ever fought in his life. Ironically, it, too, had been a zealot just like the last Sangaili he had fought before going through that accursed Forerunner portal. As he often was when he wasn't encased in his armor, Naruto was dressed in the black lightly armored bodysuit that he wore beneath his Olympus armor, the incredibly durable, thick, and almost rubber-like titanium nanocomposite bodysuit conforming to his body like a second set of skin. Over it, he wore a simple pair of baggy black cargo pants held up with a plain black belt and the leggings tucked into black knee-high combat boots. The bodysuit covered every part of his body, stopping at the base of his jaw where his neck connected with his skull. Oh wait. My bad. I forgot that you've been going out past the wall to pointlessly knock around a few Grim, or go out to harass and shut down White Fang operations in the area, a couple times a week. Kurama continued agitatedly, the normally calm AI gradually getting more upset with her human partner. She was getting tired of him being such a hardcore shut-in. Unlike me, you aren't a machine, Naruto. It's been a year since we came here and you still don't know a single person in this world on a personal level. You can't keep isolating yourself from everyone like this just because you... I said that's enough, Kurama. Naruto snapped without turning to face the AI, still standing in front of the storage locker he kept his armor in, tightly gripping the locker's admittedly flimsy door with one hand. Sighing quietly as he calmed back down, Naruto slowly shut the locker before walking back over to the chair set in front of the workbench, a slightly tired sigh escaping him as he sat back down. You're right, I'm not a machine. No matter how many times I might call myself one, I'll call him tomorrow morning. No. Kurama remarked before pointing a tiny finger at the phone sitting not too far from her DC chip. You'll call him now. When did you get so bossy? Naruto grumbled quietly while grabbing the phone and standing once again to get a little privacy from his AI while he made the phone call. The same time you started acting like an agoraphobic idiot, Kurama murmured quietly, mostly to herself, while crossing her arms over her chest and looking off to the side stubbornly. Shaking his head at the AI, Naruto walked away, already dialing the number. The AI, who had been fresh when he had received her, had been developing a rather solid personality of her own since they jumped dimensions last year. He still held a strong hatred of portals because of that day. After ringing a couple times, the call was answered on the other end. Ah, hello, Naruto. The man on the other end inquired. Have you made a decision? I have a question I want to ask you first, Ozpin. Naruto responded while glancing over at Kurama, who had taken to looking through some of the data she had collected over the past year. Do you have a uniform in my size? I believe we can come up with something, Ozpin replied somewhat jokingly, his mild amusement clear in his even tone of voice. XXX, Olympus is online and fully operational. Kurama informed her partner in the same calm and calculative professionalism she'd had when they were first paired together, her DC chip firmly slotted on the back of Naruto's helmet. So nervous about your first day of school? Don't start. Naruto cautioned half-heartedly with a small smirk hidden by his helmet as he hefted the bulky and heavy 4-foot-long rectangular object of jet black metal that was his strongest weapon, the pillar-like object being roughly a foot thick and a foot wide, before mounting it to his back behind his left shoulder. It had a number of different weapon modes built into it, with each one having their own strengths, weaknesses, and purposes. He then grabbed the reconstructed version of his old saw light machine gun, which was jet black with a dark gray drum mag, before setting it behind his right shoulder. But to be entirely honest, yes, I am a little uncertain about today. Don't worry. I doubt anyone will be picking on someone like you anytime soon. Kurama remarked reassuringly, her quiet tittering echoing in the blonde's ears. They'll probably be too afraid that you might step on them. Very funny. Naruto mumbled dryly and sarcastically while grabbing the final piece to his full arsenal, the ever-reliable M6H2 PDWS Magnum pistol. It was a reconstruction, but still the same general weapon. Mounting it to the side of his right thigh, Naruto couldn't help letting his hand rest on the sidearm's grip for a second longer. Momentary flashbacks of past experiences with the pistol flickering across the forefront of his mind. His old magnum had saved his life on numerous occasions during the second invasion of Reach and throughout his short military career in the UNSC prior to his relocation last year. His new one had proven itself to be just as dependable as the original had been. But that's not what I'm concerned about. I know, Kurama responded softly, fully understanding what he meant. Just as most other Spartans were, Naruto was an introvert because of his military uprising, having been turned into a living weapon by the UNSC to combat its enemies, the Covenant, most commonly. Don't worry, Naruto. Everything will be okay. We'll see, Naruto mumbled quietly under his breath, as he finally stepped away from the jet black Warthog he had built for his own personal use. The all-terrain vehicle currently parked in one of the limited private garages Beacon Academy offered to some of its students and staff. Shutting the garage door and locking it, Naruto left the parking garage and headed for the main academy building for the welcoming ceremony. As he made the trek to the main collection of buildings, his suit's automated sensors predictably scanned every single person he saw along the way. The suit was even scanning and breaking down their individual weapons to form a threat-level analysis database in its built-in memory banks, something that was stored in the thick collar around his neck. A high-caliber sniper scythe. Kurama cooed with interest as a small screen popped up in the corner of the Spartan's HUD that showed a live feed focused on the weapon and its owner, who was walking with a scrawny blonde teen equipped with a simple sword and shield. I wonder how such an innocent-looking little girl got her hands on such a dangerous weapon. It's none of our business, Naruto remarked quietly before his eyes locked onto a girl with black hair and a black bow on her head. The same girl was staring at him with a look of barely restrained shock as she stopped dead in her tracks, watching with slightly wide eyes as he walked by her with heavy, muted metallic footsteps. He could see the recognition in her amber eyes. She knew who he was, but how? He dismissed it for the time being, though the girl's profile in his suit's database was tagged for later review. It seemed they had met before, since her file was now updated, not newly made like those of everyone else he had come across so far. Ozpin better keep his word. I checked the guy's file and history. Ozpin has a knack for keeping his word in the strangest of ways sometimes, but he keeps his word nonetheless, Kurama commented. Still, he's got quite the resume. It kind of makes me wonder why he became Beacon Academy's headmaster. Again, it's none of our business, Naruto repeated as he entered the main building, ignoring the looks of awe and hesitance many of the other students had on their faces upon seeing the 7-foot-4-inch tall walking mountain of black metal lumbering past them. Picking out a spot along the wall near the main door, Naruto patiently waited for the welcoming ceremony to begin with his metal-encased arms crossed over his chest. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait long, since, barely 5 minutes later, a familiar-looking white-haired man walked onto the stage, dressed in black with a green scarf around his neck, an odd-looking cane or walking stick grasped in one hand, and a mug held in the other. It was quiet for a few seconds before Professor Ozpin finally spoke. I'll keep this brief. You have come here today in search of knowledge, to hone your craft, and acquire new skills. And when you finish, you plan to dedicate your life to the protection of the people. Ozpin began, his gaze slowly sweeping across the audience as he gave his speech, as interested as he was in the team. Ozpin let his gaze smoothly glide over Naruto in the same manner it did with the other new applicants. However, I look amongst you and all I see is wasted energy in need of purpose, direction. You assume knowledge can free you of this. Nevertheless, your time in this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. It is up to you to take the first step. You will gather in the ballroom tonight. Glinda spoke up as Ozpin left the stage. Tomorrow, your initiation begins. Be ready. You are dismissed. Thinking over Ozpin's brief speech, Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly before heading in the direction of the ballroom to find himself a quiet and dark spot to set up for the night. He never noticed the few pairs of curious eyes following after him as he waded through the crowd. XXX, Emerald Forest. A vast and dense expanse of woodlands to the east of Beacon Academy, just beyond Beacon Cliff. While it was home to the local wildlife, it also housed a multitude of grim of all kinds. The Emerald Forest was also Beacon Academy's chosen battlefield for the initiation test. Streaking through the lush green forest was a devastating beam of scarlet energy that effortlessly went through everything it came in contact with. After only a second, though, the beam vanished, but it had left destruction in its wake. Holes bigger than a person's head had been burned into tree trunks and rocks alike, some small flickering wisps of fire ringing a couple of the holes in the trees. Although it was Brunhilde's first field test, I believe we can call it a success, Kurama commented as the forward-pointing end of the large and bulky jet-black weapon resting on her partner's shoulder closed to cover the weapon's beam-generating barrel. While it had been most commonly called a Spartan laser back in their original dimension, Naruto had given the multiform weapon the name Brunhilde. His saw had been named Victoria and his magnum had been named Anastasia. That was only the first test for the nonlinear rifle mode, Kurama, not the entire weapon, Naruto reminded his AI companion as he started walking north again while setting Brunhilde on his back. He then pulled out his pistol, Anastasia, and held the deceptively powerful sidearm in his right hand, so long as it was loaded with explosive-tipped rounds. His magnum could kill the average Beowulf and small to medium-sized Nevermore Grim with as few as a single shot to the head. We still need to field test the other 3 modes before we can declare Brunhilde as complete. True, but the nonlinear rifle was the most complex weapon mode you built into it. Kurama reasoned. Since it's proven itself to be fully functioning, it stands to reason that the other weapon modes will perform just as well. Yes, but there is still the chance that they'll malfunction. Naruto countered almost casually, something Kurama couldn't argue. As he walked, the Spartan checked the topographical scan of the area his suit had taken while he was in mid-flight after being launched from Beacon Cliff. Ozpin had told them all to find some ancient ruins in the Emerald Forest's northern area and collect a so far unknown relic of some kind located within the ruins. He was still a little uncertain when it came to what the headmaster had told them about the first person they made eye contact with being their partner for the next 4 years. There seems to be a man-made structure less than half a kilometer away to our north-northeast, Naruto remarked, drawing Kurama's attention to the map Naruto was using. Do you think it might be the ruins Ozpin was talking about? There's only one way to find out, Kurama commented before tagging the location. A small bright blue diamond-shaped marker appearing on the map and on his HUD with a small similarly colored distance counter just above it. Coordinates tagged. Estimated distance from target location, 425 meters. Naruto stayed quiet, however, as he turned his head to the side slightly, having thought he heard something. Hearing another gunshot from nearby, Naruto instantly took off through the forest as fast as his heavily armored frame would allow in the direction the sound had come from. Switching Anastasia for Victoria, his saw, Naruto crashed through the underbrush and out into a small clearing just in time to spot an Ursa rearing up on its hind legs behind a blonde-haired young woman with yellow dual-ranged shot gauntlets on her hands and wrists. Just as the girl noticed the Ursa and turned to face it, Naruto had shouldered his light machine gun and opened fire on the bear-like creature without halting his charge, his saw's armor-piercing rounds tearing through its flank without resistance. Closing the gap between them in only a handful of strides, Naruto shoulder-checked the Ursa, knocking it to the ground several feet away before unloading one last 5-shot burst into the Grimm's chest to make sure it was killed. That was awesome! Yang suddenly exclaimed excitedly, completely forgetting her anger about one of the other Ursa hurting her luscious golden yellow locks. I mean, you just came charging through here like a rhino, guns blazing and everything. Naruto could only give the young woman an odd look from within his helmet before his suit's motion sensor picked up movement behind him. Reflexively, Naruto spun around instantly with Victoria's stock pressed into his armored shoulder and pointed directly at the source. Spotting the bow-wearing girl he had seen yesterday, however, Naruto immediately lowered his weapon before putting it away. It still had just under 3/4 of a drum mag, so he didn't bother reloading it yet. What's your name? Yang curiously asked both Naruto and the black-haired girl, glancing from one to the other. I'm Yang, Blake. The girl answered while Naruto took his helmet off, letting them see his face. Ozpin did say that they had to make eye contact. Naruto. The Spartan responded, looked from Yang to Blake for a moment. That was when a thought occurred to him. It appears we've reached an impasse. I guess we have, Yang remarked with a slightly awkward grin, knowing Naruto was referring to the matter of who became partners and who was left to continue searching. Maybe all 3 of us could be partners. And what about the rule concerning the assignment of teammates? First person you make eye contact is to be your partner for the next 4 years. Naruto countered logically while putting his helmet back on. The first person you made eye contact with was me. Yang pointed out with another grin, this one being more cheerful and energetic. And the first person you made eye contact with was her. Naruto calmly argued, gesturing towards Blake. Yang's grin faltered at that. Yes, but you were the one that saved Yang from that Ursa and you just said that the first person we make eye contact with is to be our partner. Ozpin never said anything about someone not having more than one partner. Blake spoke up, finally joining the conversation. Naruto seemed a bit thoughtful at that while Yang's grin came back in full force. The first person you and I both made eye contact with was Yang, so technically, she now has 2 partners. She does have a valid point there, Naruto. Kurama piped in from within Naruto's helmet, heard only by the Spartan. Besides, Ozpin has already made it clear to us that he sees a lot of potential in you. I don't believe he'll let you go so easily over something as menial as who our partner is. Alright. Naruto finally spoke up after a few seconds of thought, looking to Yang. We'll do things your way, but if it turns out that you're wrong, I will step aside and you 2 will become partners. Agreed? Agreed. Yang determinedly parroted back to her fellow blonde. Yang's firm belief that she'd be the one that came out victorious in the end showed clearly in her lavender eyes, something that Naruto immediately noticed before smirking slightly without really knowing why. What neither of them noticed, however, was the slightly cautious look Blake was giving the armored teen that she recognized as the same person that had been interfering with the White Fang for the better part of that past year. Amongst the White Fang, the heavily armored teen in front of her was known as simply as the Titan. We should keep moving. Blake suddenly spoke up, drawing the attention of her 2 new partners. We still have to find the ruins, let alone retrieve one of the relics there. Right. Come on, it isn't far from here. Naruto returned as he started walking back in the direction of the still-tagged ruins, retrieving Victoria once more and cradling the weapon in his hands. Behind him, Young and Blake shared a brief glance before following after the 7-foot-tall heavily armored giant of a teenager. XXX. After only a good 10 or 15 minutes of walking, the group of 3 finally reached the ruins Ozpin had told them find. It was pretty busted up and old-looking, being only a circular stone dais with a number of stone pedestals set up in a semicircle along the back curve of the dais with the broken remains of a wall beyond the pedestals. Half of the relics were gold, the other half being black, but they were all still chess pieces? Blake mumbled curiously as they drew closer to the temple ruins. Some of them are missing, Naruto pointed out, gesturing to one of the pedestals that didn't have relic on it. It appears we weren't the first ones to find this place. Well, I guess we should pick one, Blake commented uncertainly. Chess pieces weren't exactly the first thing that came to mind when someone said relics. How about a cute little pony? Yang asked enthusiastically while snatching up one of the gold knight pieces, holding it out towards her partners for them to look at. Sure, the dark-haired 17-year-old girl drawled a little sarcastically with a roll of her eyes, but she still smirked a little at the blonde girl's cheerfulness. It was refreshing for once. Even Naruto couldn't help smirking a little at Yang's seemingly boundless energy. Well, that wasn't too hard, now was it? Yang remarked idly while pocketing their chosen chess piece, still grinning. It's not like this place was difficult to find, Blake returned, though it went without saying that it would have taken them a little longer to find if it hadn't been for Naruto, who was standing off to the side with his light machine gun in his hands as he kept an eye out for any Grimm that might try to attack them. So what now? Yang asked a bit awkwardly, only for Naruto to notice how Blake was staring up at something in the sky. When he looked up as well, Yang curiously followed their example. Bonsai! Ruby hollered as she fell through the air, only to be hit with another flying body that sent them both into a tree. Idly, Naruto realized that the second person had been the scrawny-looking kid he had seen with the cloak-wearing girl yesterday. Did your sister just fall from the sky? Blake questioned in disbelief, Ruby's entrance having captured most of their attention, while Naruto stood up and dusted himself off, Kurama still panting slightly out of excitement with wide eyes. Ayam was cut short when they heard a noise not too far away before an Ursa burst through the tree line, only to collapse in death a second later with an orange-haired girl riding on its back. While the others were distracted with the new arrival of the girl and the dark-haired male with her, Naruto became more occupied with the arrival of the large Death Stalker chasing down a red-haired girl as they, too, broke through the tree line further away. Without hesitating, Naruto rushed forward in the girl's direction, wielding Victoria with his right hand while grabbing Brunhilde with his left hand. Activating the giant weapon's only defensive mode, Naruto ran straight for the Death Stalker as Brunhilde opened up to form a rectangular door-like shield that he quickly brought up while stepping between the girl and the Death Stalker's pincer. Bracing himself just before impact, Naruto deflected the snapping claws off to the side before moving the shield aside and aiming Victoria at the scorpion-like monster's face. A split second later, the Death Stalker was chittering in both anger and pain as a relentless barrage of penetrating bullets battered its dense armor, taking out a small handful of its many eyes. Before it could suffer any more harm, the massive scorpion beast used its pincers to cover its face, shielding it from the bullet storm. Using that moment to his advantage, Naruto switched Brunhilde to its nonlinear rifle mode, causing the armor plates to fold back in before bracing the weapon on his left shoulder like he had earlier while the forward-pointing end opened up. Letting go of his saw's trigger, Naruto held down the trigger to Brunhilde, causing a red glow to build up from within the barrel just as the Death Stalker parted its giant claws now that it was no longer being shot at. However, before it could try to attack the black-armored human, the last thing the Death Stalker saw was a blinding red light that filled its vision. The scorching beam of Brunhilde's nonlinear rifle burned straight through the armor-plated Grimm in less than 2 seconds. Are you hurt? Naruto asked the red-haired girl behind him while she stared at him and the now-dissolving Death Stalker in awe. Left speechless by the sheer destructive power of the heavily armored teen's weapon, Pyrrha mutely shook her head negatively, still a little slack-jawed from what she had just seen. Nodding his head once, Naruto switched Brunhilde to the third of its 4 modes, causing the nonlinear rifle barrel to rotate out with another barrel of similar size. The Spartan laser's dust-based power supply was almost empty now. Good. Go join the others, Naruto instructed as he turned his attention to the giant Nevermore flying high above them, targeting the massive raven-like Grimm while the girl went back to the others to check on her partner John. Naruto waited for the weapon to lock onto the Nevermore before squeezing the trigger. As the 102mm heat-shaped charge high-velocity rocket shot out and streaked towards the Nevermore, Naruto was already locking back on to the aerial monster just in case the first shot didn't bring the Nevermore down. Strafing to the side at the last second, the Nevermore barely dodged the rocket that had homed in on it before banking to the other side, intending to circle around in order to attack the human that had fired the explosive projectile. When the Nevermore circled back and lined itself up for an attack a few seconds later, Naruto waited for the first rocket to come back around and nailed the flying Grimm in the back, causing it to shriek in pain and surprise, before firing a second rocket that caught the Nevermore directly in the chest while it was still disoriented. This time, the Nevermore was too hurt to keep itself airborne and plummeted straight down to the ground, though it was still alive. As it hit the ground skid across the large clearing towards him, Naruto almost casually put Brunhilde away before reloading Victoria. Chambering the first round, Naruto shouldered the light machine gun just as the Nevermore, too disoriented and hurt to move at the moment, came came to a complete halt only a dozen meters away from him. Mercilessly, Naruto squeezed the trigger and unleashed a relentless barrage into the avian's head, the bullets rapidly shredding the Grimm's black flesh. Holy shit! Yang breathed out in shock, the others having similar reactions after watching the veritable juggernaut of a huntsman in training single-handedly take down two alpha-level Grimm, back-to-back, without even breaking a sweat. Did that really just happen? Blake quietly asked, her eyes wide with slightly fearful shock. She had absolutely no idea that the Titan had such powerful weapons. Aha, Ruby answered, also greatly stunned by what they had all seen, only it was for a completely different reason. His weapons were just so cool, she just had to see them up close and try them out for herself later. If he'd let her, that is. Weiss, Ruby's partner, could only stare at the black armored team that held everyone's rapt attention with a blank, dumbfounded look on her face. Having grown up in the militaristic kingdom of Atlas, she immediately spotted the signs of strict discipline and training that only a military-trained soldier could obtain. But his fearless stoicism and ruthless efficiency put him on an entirely new level unique to him, and him alone. The Shin'i heiress was oblivious to just how close she was to the truth about Naruto. XXX. Later that afternoon, when the test was finally over, the 81 new students that had completed the initiation test were gathered around the stage in the main hall where the welcoming ceremony had been held while Beacon's upperclassmen were situated behind them, simply watching as the team naming ceremony took place. One by one, teams of 4 were called up onto the stage before Ozpin would give them a personalized team name and designate who the team's leader would be. Still fully outfitted in their battle gear, Naruto stood between Yang and Blake with Ruby, Nora, Weiss, Ren, Pira, and John directly in front of the stage. Helmet hanging from a magnetic strip at his left hip, Naruto kept his arms crossed over his chest with a blank, expressionless look on his face as he and the others waited for their names to be called. As the newly formed team JNPR, Juniper, stepped off the stage, Ozpin read the next 4 names on his list, those called walking onto the stage. And finally, Blake Belladonna, Ruby Rose, Naruto Uzumaki, Weiss Shin'i, and Yang Xiaolong. The 5 of you retrieved the White Knight pieces. From now on, you will work together as Team RWBYN. Ruben, led by Ozpin, paused merely for dramatic suspense, his eyes turning to the youngest and shortest of the group while Weiss waited anxiously, believing she would be the one named as team leader. Ruby Rose, I'm so proud of you! Yang exclaimed cheerfully as she hugged her younger half-sister. Standing at the end of the group next to Blake, Weiss could only stare at Ozpin in utter bewilderment, having fully expected that she would be chosen, not Ruby. Naruto himself was a little surprised with Ozpin's choice, but the man obviously had a reason for appointing Ruby as the team leader. The Spartan had no desire of being the leader, anyways. It looks like things are shaping up to be an interesting year, Ozpin remarked casually, yet thoughtfully as the final portion of the initiation process came to a close. Chapter 3. You know, we never did get to test Brunhilde's 4th mode, Kurama remarked, her avatar floating over her DC chip that had been set on the nearby bench while Naruto shed his armor. The team naming ceremony that had followed the conclusion of the initiation test having ended a little while ago. He was the only person in the locker room, having purposefully waited until everyone else had left before disarming himself. Hitting the hidden release mechanism for his body armor, Naruto waited a moment as the armor split down the middle of his back and opened up, allowing him to pull it free of his torso. After closing it back up, he placed it on its mounts in the larger-than-average locker the Academy had supplied him with, having already shed his helmet and the armor that had covered his arms. Mounted to either of the locker's 2 doors were his weapons, with Brunhilde taking up the entire left door while Victoria and Anastasia were set on the right door. A full supply of ammunition for each weapon set next to their respective weapons. Then it'll just have to wait. Naruto returned while removing the armor on his legs, putting each section of armor away as he went. Regardless, Brunhilde's 3 other modes are fully functional, but I need to find a way to decrease the nonlinear rifle's energy consumption without sacrificing power. It burned through its dust core so fast that I only got 2 full power shots out of it. I'll see what I can come up with, his AI partner answered before putting a hand on her hip and giving the Spartan a stern look. In the meantime, you better stop isolating yourself from everyone and start making some friends, or else I'll freeze up the Olympus's armor lock systems and seal you in your precious armor the next time you put it on. And I could just leave you in my locker next time. Naruto threatened with a flat look, something that made Kurama flinch back slightly with a moderately nervous look on her face. She didn't like being away from her partner. Despite being an infinitely complex collection of programming and data, the smart AI still felt fear, and being separated from Naruto was the one thing that scared her the most. You wouldn't do that to me, would you? Kurama questioned hesitantly, but Naruto ignored her as he started taking the armor off his other leg. You know how I feel about that, Naruto. It's not right. Then don't threaten to lock me up in my own armor, Naruto retorted casually. He wouldn't actually leave her behind or anything, the AI having been the one unchanging constant in his life for almost 2 years now, and he'd grown far too attached to her to do that. Honestly, Kurama was his closest companion, and the only friend he'd ever had in his life. He didn't know what he would do with himself if he ever lost her. He still had 5.5 years to figure out a way to prolong her 7-year lifespan before she fell victim to rampancy and died. You're such a jerk, Naruto, Kurama mumbled as she turned away from him with her arms crossed over her chest, pouting childishly. Naruto couldn't help shaking his head a little at how his AI partner was behaving, smiling faintly. Although she was one of the most advanced smart AIs the UNSC had ever made at the time of their relocation, Kurama wasn't just an AI to Naruto, being incredibly human in her behavior and personality, and fully capable of feeling and expressing all of the same emotions a human was capable of. Naruto had come to see her as another living being, another person, not just an AI. "How are the pelican designs coming along?" Naruto asked while dressing himself in a pair of baggy black cargo pants, still clad in his protective and admittedly comfortable bodysuit. "Like always," Kurama huffed as she turned back around to face her partner, though she still glared off to the side a little. "They're almost done, but it'll still be a little while before they're finished," she begrudgingly answered, still upset with the Spartan. Converting UNSC technology into this world's technology isn't easy. Right now, the main problem is taking the Pelican's original fuel consumption rate and calculating what it would be with a dust-based fuel source. After that, I'll have to come up with an entirely new engine and propulsion system for it, and then try to refine it all to minimize the amount of dust it would use without sacrificing its performance capabilities. Couldn't you use the one you came up with for the Warthog as a guideline for the Pelican designs?" Naruto offered while shutting his locker and sitting on the bench beside Kurama's DC chip, putting his boots on. Pausing for a moment, Kurama suddenly looked a little embarrassed as she looked down at her feet. "I didn't think about that," she reluctantly, and quietly admitted with a slight pout on her face again. She huffed for a second time before giving the Spartan another stern look. "While I'm busy doing all of that, are you going to start acting like an actual human being from now on, or am I going to have to keep my word and lock you up in Olympus?" "I make no promises," Naruto remarked as he picked up Kurama's DC chip, her avatar vanishing in response. Slipping the card-like item containing his AI partner's sentience into a special pocket-like slot on the bicep of his bodysuit's left sleeve, Naruto sealed the small and shallow pouch to keep Kurama's DC chip from falling out before finally standing up and leaving the locker room. He had yet to see the dorm room he and his teammates would be living in for the next 4 years. The Spartan didn't find the idea of living with 4 young women in such close proximity of each other very appealing, but there was nothing he could do about it. He'll just have to endure. XXX. "Just why are you so interested in him, Ozpin?" Glinda inquired with slightly narrowed eyes as stood off to the side near the headmaster's desk. The white-haired man was currently staring at a handful of holographic screens originating from his desk, each one displaying different things about one person in particular. "Naruto Uzumaki. Because, Miss Goodwitch, he is a mystery. One that I intend to solve." Ozpin responded a bit cryptically without looking away from the video clip of when Naruto was found just outside of Vale's defensive walls. "About 19 years ago, I came across a couple that lived here in Vale, one an experienced huntsman that was a naturally talented technological genius, and the other an equally experienced and highly skilled huntress. Interestingly enough, they both exhibited certain traits that Mr. Uzumaki himself possesses." "Oh?" The platinum blonde woman intoned curiously. "They were both exceptionally tall. The man stood at almost exactly 7 feet in height while the woman, surprisingly, stood just an inch or two shorter than him," Ozpin remarked, surprising Glinda. The tallest average height women usually reached was about 6 feet, at most, so to hear that a huntress had been almost a full foot taller than that was quite shocking. They both possessed incredible strength and speed as well as the minds and bodies of soldiers, but they were not much different than any other person here in Vale. They both wore a set of armor not unlike young Naruto's, but they weren't quite so heavily built as his. Another interesting fact was the woman's last name, Uzumaki. "You think he might be their son?" Glinda questioned curiously, getting an unintelligible sound of confirmation from the professor. "And just where are his supposed parents?" "They passed away just about a year ago after the airship they were in was attacked by an Alpha-level Nevermore while taking their 16-year-old son out on a training exercise out in the wilds." Ozpin responded quietly, still having yet to look away from the screens floating over his desk while leaning back in his chair, his interlocked fingers held just in front of his face. "The wreckage was found later that same day, and their bodies recovered for a proper funeral, but their son's was never found. Their now 15-year-old daughter is currently attending Signal. However, just a couple days after the incident, Naruto shows up outside of Vale's southern walls." "Have you contacted the girl yet?" Glinda questioned a few moments after Ozpin finished. Beacon's headmaster shook his head negatively. "No, not yet," he responded quietly before shutting down the projectors built into his desk. "I want to be certain about it before I contact the girl. It might not bode well if my assumption is wrong, now would it?" "I suppose it wouldn't," Glinda admitted quietly, though she didn't quite agree with Ozpin's decision to withhold the information. XXX. "This might be a problem." Naruto mumbled quietly a minute or so after entering the room he and the 4 girls would be sharing for the next 4 years. "There's only 4 beds. Don't worry, big guy." Yan started while flopping down onto the bed she had chosen, giving her fellow blonde a flirty grin as she patted the spot beside her. "You can bunk up with me, if you want. I won't bite much." Real subtle Blake mumbled to the girl while passing by her to claim the last of the beds, the first 2 having been taken by Ruby and Weiss. She knew it was rude and a bit mean to leave the obscenely tall blonde without a bed or a proper place to sleep, but he had actually stepped aside and wordlessly gestured for her to take the last bed. While she felt bad for him, Blake didn't feel the slightest bit guilty for taking it. Let she who is without shame make the first move, Jan quietly stated in return, grinning cheekily and confidently. Blake simply rolled her eyes. During the brief few seconds the two girls had interacted, Naruto had mentally listed his rather limited options, weighed the pros and cons of each one in great detail, and selected the most logical and beneficial one, all in the span of only 3 seconds thanks to some of the enhancements he had undergone in the past. I will have to decline your offer, Yang, Naruto answered in response to Yang's proposal. The blonde girl looked a little disappointed, but the Spartan's following explanation for his decision absolutely shocked all 4 of the girls present to their very cores, beyond comprehension. It also made them all feel a little dumb, truthfully, from just how unbelievably accurate and calculating his answer was. Based on your height, age, body shape, and approximate fitness level, your body weight should be between 140 and 150 pounds and weighing 298 pounds myself. Our combined weight would be between 440 and 450 pounds. Judging by its structure and design, I do not believe the bed can support no more than 475 pounds without compromising its structural integrity. I would rather not test its limitations. Oh wow, he's good, Yang murmured in surprise, amazed more than upset about his guess at her weight, while the other girls looked at her in confusion. Unlike most girls their age, Yang wasn't ashamed of her weight. If anything, she was actually a little proud of it, knowing that muscle weighed more than body fat since muscle tissue had a higher density than fatty tissue. Thus she weighed more than she actually looked, something she prided herself on due to her well-endowed hourglass figure and her condensed lean musculature. He's actually right. I checked my weight just the other day before coming to Beacon and my scale said that I weighed 146 pounds. I've got to admit, you really surprised me, Naruto. No offense, but you're a whole lot smarter than I originally thought you were. I actually thought you were a stereotypical jock kind of guy that was all muscle and no brains. Yang! That's mean! Ruby cried out in Naruto's defense from her bed across the room. What? I'm just being honest. Yang countered with as much energy as her little sister, not really understanding why Ruby was getting so upset. It's not like she flat out called him a dumbass or anything. Stuck between the two, Blake and Weiss wisely kept quiet and stayed out of the argument, not wanting to get caught in the verbal crossfire. Would you rather I lie to him? And don't you start with the whole not having something nice to say, don't say it at all crap. Well, you shouldn't. Ruby argued with a combined childish glare and pout, having been about to do just that before Yang said anything about it. Finding the reason for the argument pointless, and not wanting the conflict to continue, let alone get any worse, Naruto intervened. Stop fighting. With that one almost casual and calmly spoken command, both sisters instantly went silent and glanced away from each other, the two looking not unlike scolded children. Sighing quietly, Naruto leaned back against the wall behind him and crossed his arms over his chest, closing his eyes and bowing his head slightly in thought. Thank you. So, where do you plan on sleeping? Blake inquired curiously as she readied her bed for some rest while, next to her, Weiss undid her bun-like ponytail, causing her pure ivory-colored hair to fall freely in a smooth waist-length curtain. For a brief moment, the Shini's eyes, unbidden, wandered across Naruto's body almost appraisingly, as if she were judging his worth. In the short 1 or 2 seconds she stared at him, her bright blue eyes took in every contour and detail of his sculpted muscular physique, something made quite obvious to the world around him by the black bodysuit he wore that tightly hugged every last one of his highly defined and undoubtedly rock-solid muscles. A very small part of her, hidden deep within the far reaches of her mind, Weiss idly wondered what it would feel like to be wrapped up in his strong arms as he, forcing away the unwanted thoughts and inappropriate mental images that almost started to infect her mind like an incurable plague. Weiss immediately tore her gaze away from him a moment later and leaned down to take her shoes off, blushing slightly. She couldn't help it, having always had a preference for soldier-type boys. Naruto just so happened to surpass every single one she'd come across before, outclassing even the soldier-esque boys of Atlas. Since there aren't enough beds, I guess I have no other choice than to sleep on the floor, Naruto answered, sounding almost comfortable with the idea, as he ran one of his gloved hands over his hair, absently brushing his fingertips against the small thumbnail-sized non-reflective dark gray metal plate set at the base of his skull, his Spartan neural interface, mostly hidden by his ponytail. No, you are not. 4 pairs of eyes instantly turned towards the source, 3 out of surprise and 1 out of mild curiosity and confusion. Weiss couldn't hold back the deep blush that warmed her cheeks as she tried to figure out why she suddenly blurted that out, fidgeting a little nervously as everyone focused their full attention on her. Heart racing madly, Weiss hastily tried to come up with a reasonable explanation, stammering and stumbling with her words. I mean it's bad for his posture and he won't get any rest and he'll be hurting in the morning. Oh yeah? Yang almost purred with an almost fiendish grin on her face as she started to get an idea as to why Weiss was suddenly acting so strange. Still grinning rather wolfishly at the shorter and slimmer girl, Yang glanced Weiss over, thinking. Weiss could only feel all the more uncomfortable as the buxom blonde's leering gaze locked on to her. You weigh a little under a $110, right, Weiss? That is none of your business. The Shini heiress spat indignantly, still blushing heavily while Ruby and Blake could only watch as everything began to unfold before them. Still leaning back against the wall, Naruto could only observe the four with mild confusion and slight curiosity, having never spent much time around other people in a social manner, let alone an all-female group. However, he was also growing suspicious of Yang's intentions. "I'll take that as a yes," Yang answered, her grin still in place. "Since Whis apparently doesn't want you sleeping on the floor and just so happens to be the lightest one out of us all, you can bunk with her from now on. At least until we can get another bed or something for you to sleep on at night." "What?" Weiss snapped, blushing even more heavily as she glared at Yang. "No! I refuse to let someone I don't even know sleep in my bed with me. And who are you to make that kind of decision?" "Where are you going, Naruto?" Ruby suddenly questioned, interrupting Weiss and diverting everyone's attention to the door. "To work on my truck." The Spartan answered calmly over his shoulder, as he gently shut the door behind him. To the four shocked girls left speechless in his wake, the soft click of the door latch echoed like thunder in the room. "XXX, for a battle-hardened Spartan that's always the first to engage the enemy, you sure do a lot of running when it comes to your personal problems." Kurama nearly growled at her partner as said blonde worked on the Warthog's engine, fine-tuning some of the vehicle's internal mechanics. "I thought we had come to an agreement back in the locker room earlier, Naruto?" Resting on top of the Spartan's tool cabinet was Kurama's DC chip, her avatar standing atop it. Unlike usual, Naruto was dressed solely in his camouflage cargo pants and boots, his bodysuit having been left in the front seat of his Warthog to keep from dirtying it with grease and motor oil and such. Because of it, his few scars were visible along with the numbers 419 that branded the left side of his chest. "We did and I promise nothing," Naruto responded calmly as he adjusted the regulator for the coils that heated up the spherical dust core that acted as the Warthog's primary fuel source. It was more expensive, and used most commonly in airships, but it lasted longer than the cheaper and more easily accessible liquid dust fuel used by most other vehicles. Even still, with Kurama's help, he had equipped the truck with a secondary fuel system that held a decent amount of liquid dust fuel along with a system that let him switch between the two without any problems. He even kept a couple 5-gallon jerry cans of the fluid strapped down along the sides of the Warthog's truck bed in the back, just in case he needed them in an emergency. "You can't keep doing this," Naruto Kurama murmured softly, her tone losing its aggravated bite as her concern for the lone Spartan came to the forefront once more. "Even Spartans need someone to talk to or interact with outside of combat. I've got you, don't I?" He countered rhetorically as he checked the transmission fluid level, keeping his back to Kurama. "You're more than enough for me." "No, I'm not," Naruto Kurama sighed quietly before noticing the new presence that had quietly approached them. Instead of being startled or trying to hide, Kurama merely glanced at the person for a second before focusing back on Naruto. "Just please stop shutting everyone else out, Naruto. It's not good for you and it makes me worry about you sometimes." A moment later Kurama gave the person a pleading look with a small nod of her head towards Naruto, knowing that they had overheard at least most of their conversation, before finally disappearing back into her DC chip. Noticing the disappearance of the faint red glow that accompanied Kurama's avatar, and finally noticing the almost inaudible sound of another person's quiet breathing from nearby, Naruto sighed slightly and picked up the rag he had set aside earlier, cleaning the oil and grease off his hands without turning to face the new arrival, his back kept towards them. "She's right, you know?" Blake commented as she stayed where she was, standing in the open doorway of the so-called Titan's private garage space with her arms loosely crossed over her middle, still dressed in her usual everyday attire. Originally, she had intended to get some answers to certain questions she had or, at the very least, more information on the one person that had the ability to set every white fan member, former or not, on edge with his presence alone. Now, though, she saw him as another misunderstood person, not the indomitable metal giant she had first thought him to be. He was no different than her or anyone else, really. While it was obvious to her that he had almost no experience in social matters and most definitely had issues of some form when it came to expressing his emotions, he was still just another person, one that had been dealt a bad hand in life. A small part in the very back of her mind couldn't help commenting on the 7-foot-tall blonde's rather attractive physique, especially with how the almost non-existent touch of sweat on his body made his bare, and seemingly rock-solid muscled torso glisten ever so faintly. Forcing down her slight blush at the uninvited idle thought, Blake focused back on task. Whether they're a lifelong friend, a lover, a spouse, or even a random stranger you just met, everyone needs some kind of relationship with another person in their life, Blake went on to say without moving from her spot. Even though he didn't turn to face her, Naruto suddenly paused when he heard her next point. Even machines need someone. How else are they going to be repaired or maintained? Some machines are made to be self-sufficient, Naruto argued quietly and calmly as he checked the radiator to make sure it was still full of water. But you are not a machine, Naruto. You're a human being, Blake countered in response, her eyes narrowing slightly as her expression soured slightly, but not out of anger or annoyance. It was out of understanding that came from personal experience. I don't know your past. I barely know anything at all about you beyond your name, but I do know what it's like to be alone. I also know what it's like to try doing everything yourself, to shoulder the pain and weight of everything going on in your life. It's tough and sometimes it can get so heavy that you feel as if you're going to be crushed under that weight. You need to open up to someone, Naruto, it'll help. You're one to talk, Naruto shot back quietly, catching Blake off guard. That bow of yours isn't as effective as you might think it is. So you know? Blake mumbled softly after a moment, while glancing away for a few seconds. Are you going to tell the others? That's your secret to reveal. Not mine. Naruto answered while checking to make sure everything was still properly hooked up and that there weren't any leaks. There weren't any, of course, but he made it a habit to keep his Warthog in the best working condition it could possibly be in. Hearing his response, Blake released the small breath of air she had unknowingly been holding in, relieved to know that her secret was still safe. For now, you should go get some rest. Classes start at 9 in the morning. I'm not going back to the room alone, Blake returned sternly, her tone of voice leaving no room for argument. Sighing once more, Naruto leaned against the frame of his truck's engine housing, bowing his head slightly. And just where am I going to sleep? Naruto questioned, having yet to turn around to face the brunette. He knew he didn't need much sleep at all. About 4 hours every other night was enough for him to function properly due to his augmentations, but if it got her to leave him alone about it, there should be enough space for the both of us to sleep in my bed, Blake answered indirectly before narrowing her eyes at the back of the blonde's head again, but with a slight sense of playfulness. And I'm sure it can hold us both without breaking it. I'll be up in a minute. Naruto mumbled quietly after a few seconds of silence, not wanting to talk about the subject anymore for the night. Blake, feeling a little stubborn, leaned against the private garage's doorway, her arms crossed under her chest. I can wait. Blake returned with a hint of cynicism in her voice and body language, wanting to make sure that he didn't try to get away with not doing as he was told. Sighing quietly yet again, Naruto started putting his tools and supplies away, shutting the hood to his truck. After wiping off any grease and oil on his hands once more, Naruto grabbed his bodysuit and pocketed Kurama's DC chip before exiting the private garage. As he went to shut the door to the garage and lock it, Blake couldn't help eyeing the 3-digit number that marked Naruto's bare and broad chest, her amber eyes narrowing slightly with suspicious curiosity, wondering what it meant. So who is she? And just what is she? Blake finally inquired as she gestured towards Naruto's pocket. Realizing that she was talking about Kurama, Naruto thought about being truthful for a moment before answering. Her name is Kurama. She's a smart artificial intelligence that helps me with operating my armor, allowing me to access its full potential even though I can use it effectively in combat without her. Naruto responded honestly, just without any real meaningful details as they headed back to the dorm building. While made up of data and computer programming, she is more like a person's mind in digital form, fully capable of feeling and expressing virtually every kind of emotion as well as freedom of thought, opinion, and speech. Although lacking a physical form, Kurama is no different than any other human or faunus on the planet. I didn't know there were such advanced AIs being made. The ex-White Fang member returned, growing all the more curious about the sole male member of Team RWBYN. There aren't. Kurama's the only one. My parents made her for me almost 2 years ago, and she's been my partner since then. Naruto answered honestly to the best of his knowledge, though he used the term parents to replace UNSC in order to keep his origins hidden. Strangely enough, though, he subconsciously had a very vague and almost unnoticeable feeling that the term seemed much closer to the truth than he believed. Oh, was all Blake said, noticing the hesitance in Naruto's voice and choosing not to pry any further. She then glanced at the black skin-tight bodysuit currently draped over the blonde's shoulder. You're not going to wear that to bed, are you? Is there something wrong with that? Naruto asked a little uncertainly as he glanced at the bodysuit himself. Noticing the look on Blake's face, though, Naruto decided it might be better if he didn't, whether he liked it or not. I have a pair of shorts I can wear. Good, she responded quietly, though she was secretly glad. Her natural curiosity and so far dormant attraction to the blonde had her wanting to find out what it felt like to be held by him, something she was certain would happen due to the small size of the beds. Also, being a faunus, she was naturally drawn to sources of warmth, and judging by the looks of him, Blake had a feeling that Naruto put out quite a bit of body heat. It took a great deal of willpower to keep herself from blushing again as she forcefully derailed her thoughts from that particular path, and others like it. XXX, contained within her own little world inside of her data crystal chip. Kurama reviewed the data the Olympus suit had automatically recorded the moment they came through the exit portal a year ago. She had yet to tell Naruto the real truth about how they ended up almost a kilometer in the air when they arrived in the world of Remnant, the blonde having only regained consciousness at an altitude of about 300 meters at the time. For the first minute or so, Naruto, whose body was still operating under the control of the original for the dimension they were currently in, was with a woman that, in every feasible way, looked exactly like a Spartan. All the way down to her dark red and black Mjolnir Gen 2 copperhead armor, and twin M7/caseless SMGs. With her had been what looked like another Spartan, the man clad in what appeared to be dark gray and black Mjolnir Gen 2 hunter armor with a BR-85 heavy barrel service rifle, better known as a battle rifle, to go with it. They both also had AM6H2 Magnum set on the sides of one thigh. At first, everything seemed to be fine, but just as the bullhead side door opened up to drop off the 3 armored giants and Remnant Naruto turned to grab his weapon, from off to the side, the airship was suddenly jarred quite heavily. The violent shake caused Remnant Naruto to stumble and collide headfirst with the edge of the open doorway, rendering him momentarily unconscious as he fell out of the bullhead. It was only then that it became obvious that the bullhead was under attack by a nevermore about the same size as the one from the initiation test. Seconds after entering freefall, however, there was a brief glitch in Remnant Naruto's Olympus scanners while what was visible of the teen's armor had a ripple of fiery, orange energy wash over it. Kurama believed it was in that moment that Remnant Naruto was completely replaced by UNSC/Spartan 6 Naruto in that same split-second time. She also believed that Spartan Naruto's Olympus armor physically replaced Remnant Naruto's, with the brief 1 or 2 minute long video being the only thing copied over to Spartan Naruto's Olympus database. Unfortunately, the sound file to the video was corrupted by the transition, leaving it completely silent, and due to the other 2 Spartans in the video wearing their helmets, making it impossible to read their lips. Anything said between them was forever lost. Kurama still didn't know how to tell Naruto, no matter what. She had a feeling he wouldn't be very happy with her once he found out that she had kept the information a secret from him ever since they had arrived in Remnant. However, she also knew that the longer she waited, the worse his reaction would be. It was now just a matter of how long it would take her to work up the courage to tell him. With how his current temperament had been fluctuating, no matter how slight it seemed on the outside, Kurama might have to wait anyways, depending on Naruto's mood and the outcome of whether or not he started to open up to another living person. She really hoped he did. XXX. The next morning, Yang couldn't help smirking as she glanced at the sleeping pair once again. Being early risers, she had been the first one awake and starting to get ready for their first day of school at Beacon, while Ruby was just now getting in the shower. While her little sister had missed it due to her early morning grogginess, Yang had spotted how Naruto and Blake had taken to sharing a bed during the night, while everyone else was sleeping. Dressed in only a simple pair of black shorts with roughly 3/4 of his muscular build left visible, Naruto was lying on his side with both arms loosely wrapped around Blake's much smaller and slimmer frame. The dark-haired girl's body was pressed almost flush against his bare, broad-chested torso, with her head nestled against Naruto's neck under his chin. One of her hands was lightly pressed against his chest while her other arm was slipped under Naruto's neck and wrapped around the back of his shoulders, essentially holding him in a rather affectionate and seemingly intimate manner. Yang actually thought they looked kind of cute together with how they were positioned due to how gentle and tender the scene looked and their obvious differences in size. She swiftly crushed the splinter of jealousy that entered her thoughts at the idea of the two becoming a potential couple before snapping a quick picture of the two with her scroll for potential blackmail material to use against them as leverage for some kind of favor from them in the future. A moment later, the violet-eyed girl went back to getting ready for class. PRRR. The soft rumbling coming from Blake's throat as she slept was heard solely by Naruto, her contented purring being too quiet for any of the others to hear. Instinctively drawn towards the intense amount of heat exuded by his body, Blake snuggled a little closer to the blonde and nuzzled the side of his neck with her cheek slightly as she propped her chin on his shoulder with her throat touching his shoulder. Out of subconscious reflex, Naruto held her a little tighter, ignoring how Blake's hair covered part of his face, and still feigning sleep just as he had been doing for the past hour or so. He could barely grasp the concept of what he was feeling, let alone understand or explain such feelings to someone, not even to himself. If he absolutely had described them as simply and in as few words as possible, he felt weird. Having been in physical contact with the disguised cat faunus for most of the night, since they had gone to bed, Naruto was struggling to comprehend the effects and influences their close proximity was having on both his mind and body. For the first time in his life, Naruto had semi-willingly foregone wearing his bodysuit for more than a few short minutes. With the exception of the few times he had been ordered to remove it back home, Naruto found himself trying to remember a time where he had actually touched another living being through direct skin-to-skin contact since he had first donned the pitch-black, full-body glove. He couldn't. His skin left incredibly sensitive from constantly wearing his protective and lightly armored bodysuit. It was a completely foreign and absolutely strange sensation for him to actually feel things without having some sort of buffer between his skin and whatever it was he was touching. What he was touching at the moment, just as he had been all night, had left him confused in many different ways. The warmth of another person's body that was pressed against his, the soft and silky texture of Blake's skin, the thin and delicate fabric of the girl's gray and white yukata-styled sleepwear, her warm and soft breath on his sensitive skin, her unusually cuddly sleeping behavior as opposed to her rather antisocial personality when awake. Although he was admittedly a little nervous and somewhat unsettled by the entirely new experience of actually feeling the things he touched with his unprotected skin, Naruto was honestly a little surprised to discover that he was strangely comfortable with his current situation. Regardless of how seemingly intimate and familiar his and Blake's position appeared, he found the feeling of being so close to another warm body quite soothing for some reason and had actually slept almost all night instead of just a couple hours like usual. It was all almost overwhelming for the solitary Spartan, who never really had any kind of contact with others outside of combat and various militaristic encounters in the UNSC, such as being issued orders by high-ranking military officials and solo-op mission briefings via long-distance communications. Being the only survivor of the failed Spartan 6 program, Naruto had done everything within his authority to isolate himself from as many people as possible, something that went uncontested by UNSC and ONI. The only person that could have been interpreted as being his friend had been his handler. She had been a young woman named Sakura that had been assigned to watch over him when he was only 12, the strawberry blonde pinkette having only been 19 when they had first met. However, for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about what both Blake and Kurama had said to him last night. Blake groaned softly as the early morning rays of sunlight pierced through the window and washed over her face. Tightening her grip on him, Blake buried her face against Naruto's neck to block out the light before starting to quietly purr again. Subconsciously holding her a little closer with one hand resting on her lower back, Naruto was oblivious to the faint, almost non-existent smile that formed on his face, Blake's shadow black hair hiding it from being seen by the others. Maybe they were right. Maybe it wasn't so bad to open up a little bit. Chapter 4. Are you sure about this, Naruto? Kurama inquired a little nervously as she watched Naruto work on his newest project for his Olympus suit. It had been 2 weeks since he had enrolled in Beacon Academy, and became a part of Team rwby. I still haven't been able to calculate its stability. What if it were to overload in the middle of a fight? It could either fry the suit completely or just explode, and at such a close range, either outcome has an 89.7% chance of killing you. I don't have any other choice, Kurama. Something in the fusion reactor was damaged when we passed through the portal, and it has been losing power since. It'll only last another month, at most, and that's if I keep the shields deactivated like they've been for the past 4 months, and use only the mandatory core operating systems to conserve power. Naruto responded without looking up from the object in front of him as he continued adjusting certain components. The Spartan and his AI partner were currently situated in a private workshop Beacon students had access to for repairing and upgrading their weapons. The 2 lone occupants of the small workshop were quiet for a few minutes, one due to concentration and the other out of worry. As he finished, Naruto took a moment to reinforce his resolve for his decision. It's the only option I have at this point if I want to keep using Olympus. I'll just have to risk it. I hope you're right, Kurama murmured while watching from her spot on the workshop table. The private workshop was more of a 3-walled stall or room with no door to it, being one of many in Beacon Academy's Armory Hall building. Many of the students had taken to affectionately calling it the Forge. Set on the workbench beside the blonde Spartan was the whole body piece to his Olympus suit, which split down along the back of his left shoulder before cutting back towards the middle halfway down. The now removed and properly disposed of fusion reactor once sat between his shoulders on his upper back on the body armor, the armored panel having been left open for the time being. In front of the Spartan was the new power source he had been building with great care and caution over the past week in his spare time after classes to replace the damaged fusion reactor that had originally powered his Olympus armor. The power cell's housing was made specifically to fit directly into the same socket the fusion reactor had previously occupied, with newly adapted connectors on both the suit's fusion reactor housing and the power cell itself. The new power source was made up of several small lightning-type dust cores that pushed their electrical charges along a rather complicated Celtic knot of coils wrapped around each of the dust cores in a continuous cycle, creating a Tesla coil effect. That Tesla coil effect amplified the power output of each charge a little bit every time the energy passed from one core to another, and along the coils tightly wrapped around each core. It resulted in a single charge being multiplied several-fold throughout one full cycle. Each cycle took mere nanoseconds to run its course, and each core produced its own individual charge, resulting in multiple cycles going on simultaneously, with each core producing countless charges until the energy flow was comprised of a single supercharge that supplied the suit with power, theoretically. In addition to the supercharge, the kinetic motors in the suit had been adapted to recycle some of the expended energy back into the dust-fueled power cell, just as they had with the fusion reactor, increasing the cell's power supply a fraction more and prolonging its predicted lifespan. In theory, the new power cell was supposed to put out as much energy as the old fusion reactor, if not a little more. However, instead of being a supposedly endless power supply for the suit like the fusion reactor had been, Kurama had estimated that, at best, the new power cell would have an estimated lifespan of only 14 months, with the suit being run at full power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, before needing to be replaced with a fresh power cell, with an average of roughly 1/20th of its expended energy being recycled back into the suit's power cell via the Olympus suit's many kinetic motors. With each movement he made, no matter how minor, the refunded energy boosted the theorized lifespan to approximately 22 months, just under 2 years. Realistically, however, Kurama estimated that the power cell's lifespan would last only 18 months, at most, before it needed to be replaced with a new power cell. Should everything work out properly and remain within acceptable parameters, the lowball estimated minimum lifespan for the power cell was predicated to be a mere 7 months. Even with such a short lifespan, it would work just fine for Naruto, but they still had to actually test it and make sure it worked. Naruto, Kurama spoke up just before Naruto could pick the power cell up, his hands just centimeters from grasping the dull gray metal object. It had a rectangular and somewhat flat overall design, looking not unlike a cigar box, with 3 shallow lumps in the middle of it where 3 of the cores were located, while 3 more cores flanked the triangularly grouped cluster on either side in slightly curved lines, looking almost like a pair of parentheses. All 9 cores were composed of the highest quality lightning-type dust obtainable for the most power output for the longest amount of time achievable. Anything less would have cut the power cell's lifespan down from months to weeks. Are you sure this is a good idea? Couldn't we just find a way to fix the fusion reactor or something? You know as well as I do that we can't do that. Naruto responded quietly as he lifted the new power cell and carefully moved it over to his suit's body piece. As he gently eased it into the exposed housing socket, a strange sense of nostalgia washed over him for a moment, almost as if he had done it before. Bizarre glimpses or flashes of hazily vague and almost ghostly obscure memories flickered behind his eyes, subconsciously guiding his hands as he connected the adapted couplings to the power cell. The memories, they felt as if they were his own, but he hadn't done this before, had he? Dismissing them as unimportant at the moment, Naruto set the anchor rods and tightened them as much as possible to keep the power cell from shifting or moving in the slightest during even the roughest of battles. Just trust me, Kurama. I've got a feeling that it'll work better than predicted. Alright if you say so. Kurama whispered softly, not feeling as certain about the experimental power cell's success as her partner. Although it is the weekend, I've already acquired permission for you to leave campus for the night. You should be clear to leave as soon as you're ready. Thank you, Kurama. Naruto responded quietly as he lowered the armored panel and secured it over the new power cell, silently thanking Ozpin for allowing him special access to certain materials he needed for his projects, as per one of the conditions to their agreement, such as the dust cores of his suit's new power supply. Fully dressed in his armor save for his body piece and helmet, the Spartan had already transferred his weapons to his Warthog beforehand, habitually keeping his pistol, Anastasia, mounted to the side of his thigh. Instead of putting the body piece on, however, Naruto carried it in his right hand while his helmet hung from a magnetic strip at his left hip. After mounting Kurama's DC chip to his shoulder for the moment, Naruto left the workshop and headed for the garages. He needed to run a field test, and he knew just where to go to do it. XXX. Ozpin hummed quietly to himself, completely alone in his office as he watched a live camera feed, among others, from behind his desk. Watching as Naruto drove away from campus via the lone and long road that ran between Vale and Beacon Academy, Ozpin couldn't help smirking slightly, his curiosity of the teen growing to new heights with every passing minute he observed him. Just what are you really up to, Naruto Uzumaki? He had been interested in Naruto long before he first contacted the teen with the offer to join his school. He had been one of the first to hear of Naruto's mysterious appearance outside of Vale's defensive walls a year ago, and the short-lived events that had unfolded at that time. Not only was he intrigued by Naruto's unknown past, but also his so far unrivaled combative skills and his choice in equipment. Over the past few years, a number of Elysian companies and military weapon technology contractors had made quite a few attempts to create a suit of powered armor in a manner not too dissimilar to Naruto's, but none had ever been successful. Some had come close, but still fell short in the end. A part of him wondered how the boy had managed it, but another part of Ozpin wanted to keep an eye on the teen to keep him safe. Some of those same companies weren't afraid to resort to forcing others into giving them what they wanted. Rumor had it that they would do anything from simply buying someone out for their invention to blackmailing them into handing it over to their company to even stealing such inventions from their makers in many different ways to doing just about everything else in between. The companies that utilized such shady and borderline illegal tactics had a tendency to be good at what they did, and Ozpin wanted to make sure Naruto wasn't harmed by such individuals. It only made things a little harder for him to do just that due to not having someone available to shadow the boy to act as his secret guardian. Someone that would only step in if things became too much for the teen to handle on his own. An idle thought passed through the white-haired professor's head. He wondered if there was anything in the world that the heavily armored juggernaut of a teenager couldn't handle. Thinking back to some of the physical exam tests he had undergone, just as other students had that didn't have any records of them attending a hunter training school like Signal. Without his armor, he was capable of lifting a little less than 3 times his own body weight. With his suit, Naruto had been able to lift almost 1.5 tons, but only for a brief few seconds. His speed was astonishing, both with and without his armor. On foot without his armor, they had gauged him to run as fast as almost 35 miles per hour with an unbelievable amount of stamina. With his armor on, Naruto's fastest speed had been recorded to be just over 20 miles per hour, but only for a few minutes at a time. Being a combat school, they had also tested his hand-to-hand skills and punching strength. Even without his armor, they had been unable to properly gauge his physical strength due to a combination of the sheer power his body possessed and their testing equipment being insufficient to accurately measure the huntsman in training's strength, let alone the incredible might he commanded when clad in his armor. When it came to his unarmed and unarmored hand-to-hand skills, they had pitted him against Beacon's top combat instructor, who specialized in unarmed combat. The fight had resulted in a draw with either one gaining any kind of advantage over the other, while both left the sparring arena with plenty of dark bruises scattered across their individual bodies. Just what is a Spartan capable of, Naruto? Ozpin inquired quietly under his breath as he tapped into Vale's vast array of security cameras, intending to track Naruto's movements through the city with them. When they had first talked in person shortly after Ozpin contacted him the first time, Naruto had accidentally made a comment about him being something called a Spartan, but instantly became tight-lipped whenever Ozpin questioned him about it. It was another reason why he had agreed, without much resistance, to Naruto's admittedly few, but rather costly and mildly unusual conditions for him to agree to enroll into Beacon Academy. Ozpin wanted to know as much as he could about what Naruto could do and, hopefully, gain some form of insight as to what a Spartan was and what they could do. That and to find out if there were any others, outside of those the professor suspected to be the teen's family. He would just have to wait and see, gathering more information along the way before he finally confronted the soldier-like young man about it. XXX, what the hell is he? One of the white Fang grunts called out in both fear and disbelief as he and his similarly clad Faunus comrades kept firing at the heavily armored behemoth they knew to be the Titan. Their low-caliber bullets pinged and ricocheted off of Naruto's Olympus armor all across his body as he charged forward and backhanded one of the masked Faunus rebels, sending the woman flying several meters before colliding with a wall. He's a fucking monster, that's what he is. One of the other white Fang troops yelled back in response before the Titans simply swatted another of their comrades across their shoulder, knocking them into the Faunus that had answered the other and sending both to the ground. While he was careful to hold back enough to keep from accidentally killing any of them, Naruto wanted to instill a sense of fear in the white Fang foot soldiers that would either dissuade them from continuing to work with the once peaceful and now violent white Fang organization or break their morale to the point that they wouldn't even bother trying to fight him anymore. It was rather naive of him, but after spending a year in Remnant, Naruto had actually lost the battle lust, an immediate urge to kill his enemies that the UNSC had practically engraved into his very being. Because he no longer wanted to kill anyone ever again, Naruto had taken to fighting humans and Faunus with his bare hands instead of using his weapons on them. Weapons that had been designed solely for the acts of killing and destroying whatever they were pointed at. The only weapons he would actually use against humans and Faunus would be Brunhilde's shield mode and his customized combat knife, but only if things started getting too difficult for him to accomplish barehanded. Kurama. Naruto quietly and stoically addressed his AI partner as he spotted a kneeling white Fang troop at the far end of the industrial warehouse with a rocket launcher resting on their shoulder. Just as they fired their weapon, Naruto hunkered down in a very slight crouch with his head tucked down and left forearm held out in front of him defensively, while his energy shields flashed over his body as they became active. As the rocket reached the halfway point between the launcher it had been fired from less than a second prior, and its designated target, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Initiate hard light protocol. A split second before impact, a bright flash of bluish light rushed across his body as his energy shield generators redirected the energy to his left forearm, forging a tall and broad wall of dense blue energy shards in front of his extended left forearm. Naruto subconsciously darkened the tinting on his visor to keep from getting blinded by the bright light of the rocket detonating the instant it collided with his prototype version of a Forerunner hard light shield. As the force of the blast shattered the hard light shield, Naruto was already starting to move. Sprinting as fast as he could without injuring himself, Naruto focused his sights on the white Fang soldier with the rocket launcher. Nearing the deer Faunus's general location, Naruto jumped up as high as he could while his thruster jets fired at full power for a brief moment, planting one armor-encased foot on a solid steel cargo container, and causing it to cave in a good bit from his weight. Naruto kicked off of it in another thruster-aided jump, crushing the metal container even more from the force of his takeoff. Grasping the edge of the catwalk the white Fang troop was standing on with his left hand, Naruto ceased focusing his attention on the man as he started falling back down to the ground. As the catwalk was ripped from its ceiling-mounted supports and fell to the ground behind him with the deer Faunus following it, Naruto, just passing the apex of his leap, cocked his right hand back while all of his thruster jets fired at full power, sending him rocketing straight towards the ground at even greater speeds, driving his fist into the stone floor with as much strength as he could gather in such a short amount of time. Naruto ignored the distinct and visible ripple that coursed through the ground as a circular pulse of blue aura energy rushed out from the point of contact. Standing up after executing a signature Spartan move often referred to as the ground pound, Naruto calmly looked around him to find nearly a dozen white Fang soldiers lying on the ground around him within a 20-foot radius around him, most of them either knocked unconscious or hurting too much to get back up after the powerful area of effect attack. Kurama. Status report. Naruto ordered calmly now that the chaos of the admittedly one-sided battle had come to an end. The power supply is holding up fine. No surges or fluctuations with the power distribution. Olympus is still running at full power. However, as you might have noticed already, the hard light shield completely drained your energy shields upon activation, auxiliary shields as well. It'll take a few minutes for the system to recover before your energy shields can be deployed again. Kurama responded in her usual professionalism when on the battlefield. In addition, the hard light shield prototype built into your left bracer is completely fried. We miscalculated both the amount of power needed to activate it and the strain it would place upon the hardware. You'll have to rebuild the entire device from scratch. Excluding the shield's damaged hardware, the hard light shield performed within acceptable parameters, holding strong against the rocket throughout the full explosion before giving out exactly 2.1 milliseconds after the explosion decayed to a non-lethal level. It was only a first-generation prototype. Failures are to be expected, Naruto murmured in return, mostly just thinking out loud as he stared down at the armor covering his left forearm, a very thin line of smoke rising from the main hard light projector built into his gauntlet. It'll take some time before I'll be able to place another order for materials and supplies. I didn't expect certain projects to break down so quickly when me and Ozpin agreed to keep my orders limited to once a month. In the meantime, I'll be making adjustments to the hard light shield designs to compensate for the new technical problems. We'll need a heavier gauge wire of another type of metal that can handle the hard light shield's high power output, Kurama remarked from within Naruto's helmet. Before she could continue, however, a low-caliber round pinged off the back of Naruto's head, Slowly turning around, Naruto stared at the barely standing white Fang grunt that had shot him with the pistol grasped in their shaking hands, their whole body visibly shivering out of utter terror. Without saying a word, Naruto calmly and purposefully walked towards the man with a slow, evenly measured stride, his heavy muted metallic footsteps rumbling and echoing like booming thunder in the deathly silent warehouse. With each step closer, the dog Faunus stepped back, his frightened shaking growing a little more obvious each time. "St, stay back." The lone white Fang foot soldier cried fearfully before firing off another round that glanced off the side of Naruto's helmet at the corner of his visor. It did nothing more than put a tiny crack in the toughened armor glass, the Spartan not even flinching in the slightest or pausing in his trek towards the lone dogged man, tripping over his own feet a moment later and stumbling back against one of the many cargo containers in the warehouse. The white-fanged militant accidentally fired off another shot that glanced off the side of Naruto's left thigh just a few inches above his knee. "Good, get away from me." Maintaining his vigilance, Naruto stalked right up to the man that was moments away from either pissing himself, screaming like a little girl, running like a scared rabbit, or a combination of the three. Stopping within arm's reach of the Faunus, Naruto simply glared down at the shorter male, the slender visor of his helmet being all the intimidation he needed to keep the man rooted to his spot, completely unfazed by the fact that the Faunus was pointing his pistol directly at his face. Still without uttering a single word or sound, Naruto slowly reached up and wrapped his fingers around the pistol grasped in the man's shaking hands. The next moment, 3 consecutive shots rang out, ricocheting off the blonde's helmet each time. Thankfully, he had grabbed the pistol and moved it aside just enough for the bullets to glance across the metal plating along his helmet's jaw line even as highly advanced, and so heavily armored as his suit was, the visor on his helmet was still Olympus's biggest weak spot, just as it had been for all of the Mjolnir armor models since the very beginning. Despite being a low-caliber gun, the bullets in the Faunus's pistol would have still gone through his visor at point-blank range, and undoubtedly killed him. As the gun clicked uselessly and repeatedly in the absolutely terrified white Fang rebel's desperate grasp, Naruto simply closed his eyes and took a slow, deep breath. He had to give the man credit for his fighting spirit despite being so incredibly scared, but there were some battles that just shouldn't be fought. One such battle was standing up against the Spartan 6 solo, with such a weak gun after watching said Spartan completely decimate an entire group of 36 armed combatants. Bare-handed. With a single little tug, Naruto ripped the pistol from the man's hands before easily and swiftly dismantling it, dropping the pieces to the disassembled gun on the ground with each metal part ringing as they hit the concrete flooring. He then leaned down a little until their faces were only inches apart. "Don't do that again," Naruto growled out slowly and quietly before straightening his back again and starting to walk away. He completely ignored the sound of the Faunus falling to the ground, having fainted after such a close brush with death. "What's the next target, Kurama? We still have 7 hours to finish testing the other secondary combat systems. The Vale Police Department communication channels have been hinting at a possible crime syndicate located here in the city. According to what has been said over the comms, they have a low overall threat level, but are rumored to have a large number of members," Kurama offered in response, though she rolled her eyes from within her digital realm after watching her partner, through Olympus, purposefully scare the poor dog Faunus into nearly having a heart attack. "I'm tagging all known and suspected hot spots for the syndicate on your GPS. Tapping into the VPD database via wireless connection through the communication channels, transferring all known files on the syndicate to Olympus's database now." "Torchwick," Roman Naruto mumbled quietly as he narrowed his eyes slightly, the summarized and condensed file on the man currently being displayed off to the side of his HUD. He also noticed that there were nearly 40 tagged locations showing up on his GPS. Narrow down the target locations to those where Torchwick has been sighted on more than one occasion in the past 6 months. Also, display the time and date stamps for each of the sightings at each location and designate them with priority markers according to the chronological order of the sightings. I want to see if there's any kind of pattern to his movements. It might give away the approximate location of where he's been hiding out at. One moment, there you go," Kurama responded, the 40 tag locations sharply dropping down to only 12.5 locations, a series of multicolored lines connecting each of the tagged locations in a rough pattern of Roman Torchwick's movements. Each of the GPS tags had anywhere between 2 and 15 reported sightings with surprisingly pinpoint accurate and precise time and date stamps for each sighting that counted down to the millisecond of the reported sighting. Kurama had obviously accessed the VPD link to Vale's innumerable security cameras that lined virtually every street in the city and cross-referenced the sighting reports with old security recordings, videos, and pictures. Even after working together for a little more than a year and a half so far, the smart AI continued to surprise him every so often, especially with how quickly she had adapted to the foreign technology of their new home. "I doubt we'll find him tonight, but we'll start from the beginning and retrace his steps. If I can figure out a more definite pattern to his movements, I might be able to figure out what his next move might be," Naruto instructed as he exited the warehouse and made his way over to his Warthog, taking a moment to make sure his weapons were where he had left them when he had blitzed the group of white Fang thugs. They had been preparing to mobilize against a small convoy of Schnee Dust Company trucks ferrying dust from the industrial district's loading docks to the commercial district, where the dust would then be distributed amongst the stores and businesses listed on their delivery routes. Brunhilde, his only real multiform weapon, was mounted to the driver's side interior wall of the truck bed via magnetic plates that he could switch on and off to keep it from moving around or getting lost/stolen while he was driving or while away from the heavy-duty, all-terrain vehicle. Victoria, his saw, was set in a slot set next to the driver's seat between it and the bottom edge of the Warthog's door, the light machine gun having also been anchored in place with magnetic plates, to ensure that his primary weapon was always on hand whenever he was in or at least near the truck. As always, though, Anastasia, his magnum pistol, was magnetically holstered to the side of his right thigh. "Just remember that we have to get back to Beacon in time to meet back up with the rest of our team," Kurama reminded. An almost non-existent grimace tugged at the blonde's lips. "Ruby seemed really excited about us all going out together as a team." "I remember, Kurama," Naruto returned with a slightly irritated tone as he climbed into his Warthog and started the engine. "I don't want to, but I'll go." XXX. Explosions tore up the pavement and buildings all around him as he charged the ground forces he was faced with. The city had once been a brilliant and prospering metropolis for mankind, but it was now a war zone, turned into a rugged and disheartening battlefield by their alien foes. A rather large force of Sangaili that had broken away from the Covenant after the neutrality treaty had been established between the conflicting factions of the Covenant and the UNSC and humans in general. "We're all going to die here, man. There's no way we can win this," one of the Marines cried from within the dense fog of aerated stone dust and smoke that shrouded the area. The soldier had succumbed to his fear. "We need to get the fuck out of here. Stow it, soldier." Another Marine barked out between short fits of return fire from his UNSC-issued battle rifle, judging by the sound of its three-shot bursts. He didn't waste any more time listening to them as he rushed out from behind the stone wall he had taken cover behind to avoid the most recent bout of heavy plasma shelling from the 3 Covenant wraiths set at the opposite end of the broad and long road. It was his first real battle outside of the few solo ops he had done to wipe out key enemy installations for both the Sangaili forces he was currently faced with and the human insurrectionist forces that constantly harassed the UNSC. It was also the first battle he had fought that involved other UNSC forces, including his Spartan brethren. He wasn't used to fighting alongside comrades. From the very beginning, he had been called a lone wolf, being the lone survivor of the Spartan 6 program augmentations. Shouldering his saw as his suit's highly advanced built-in sensors adjusted to the dense dust cloud he was submerged in, Sierra 419 narrowed his eyes slightly from within the confines of his jet-black helmet. As his automated sensors pierced through the veil of pale gray dust and onyx smoke, Sierra 419's eyes flicked from one side to the other, as his HUD changed slightly, outlining everything in front of him to define virtually everything within his field of view. Working in tandem with his motion tracker, friendly UNSC Marines and ODSTs were outlined in green amongst the hues of gray and black that tried to shroud his enemies, while the Sangaili were tagged on his motion tracker and outlined on his HUD in scarlet. Spotting the first one to cross his path just 10 meters ahead of him, Sierra 419 raised his rifle without breaking stride, intending to gun down the split-jawed alien. Before he could squeeze the trigger to his drum-fed light machine gun, however, another Sangaili sprung from its hiding place just a few feet away from him on his left. Letting loose a bellowing roar, the zealot swung its right energy sword to cleave through the Spartan's helmet and skull, the second energy sword grasped in its left hand having already been cocked back for a follow-up swing. Digging his heels into the ground and twisting his body just in time, Sierra 419's eyes widened as the blazing hot plasma blade made contact with his helmet in a grazing sweep, scarring the armor mounted across his chest immediately afterwards. Without making a sound outside of a pained grunt through gnashed teeth, Sierra 419 followed through with the turn, swinging his saw around before squeezing the trigger at point-blank range. In a rapid and continuous explosion of gunfire, the zealot stumbled back repeatedly as the armor-piercing rounds the weapon was loaded with tore through its energy shield and armor, drilling through its dark flesh with little resistance. TCH Sierra 419 scoffed with a scowl as the zealot fell on its back, its dark blue blood pooling under its body. Ignoring the fierce pain coming from the cauterized slash wound that now cut across his nose and left cheek from the searing hot blade of the zealot's plasma-based close combat weapon, Sierra 419 looked back up and to the side in the direction of the Sangaili he had originally targeted. A single dark blue eye glared out through the crevice burned into his helmet and visor, as the lone Spartan 6 to exist single-handedly swung his saw back around and pointed it back at the now charging and commonplace elite miner. Without a single shred of mercy or a nanosecond's worth of hesitation, Sierra 419 opened fire on the Sangaili as plasma fire from its storm rifle splashed against the monolithic Spartan 6 heavy-duty energy shields just as they recharged, his secondary auxiliary shields having activated the instant the deceased zealot's energy sword had moved away from his body, ignoring the fist-sized projectiles of superheated energy as they crashed against his shield harmlessly. The one nicknamed the Black Mountain by those that knew of him watched the elite miner drop to the ground and slide to a halt just a handful of inches away from his armored feet with a cold fury burning in his dark eyes. 14-year-old Naruto Uzumaki, also known as Sierra 419, let out a quiet, almost bestial growl that rumbled in his throat and chest as his eyes flicked back up to the Sangaili ranks further down the dust-shrouded street, the right half of his HUD retaining its operational use despite the severe damage his helmet had sustained along the left side. He had been bred to be far stronger and more durable than any previous Spartan generation, even when set shoulder to shoulder with a Spartan 2, the supposed strongest of Spartan generations. It was obvious that the Spartan 6, only a fraction bigger than a Spartan 2, was the more fearsome and ferocious of the two different breeds. He was Naruto Uzumaki, Sierra 419, lone survivor of the failed Spartan 6 program's surgical and biochemical augmentations, and sole bearer of the Mjolnir Mark 7 445 super wide armor suit that had been simply designated Olympus. He had been bred to be stronger, faster, tougher than any Spartan ever made by the UNSC. He was called the Perfect Spartan, the UNSC's perfect weapon, and he was currently pointed at the primarily Sanghaili forces that had broken away from the Covenant. Apart from opening his eyes, Naruto showed no outward sign of his dream memory having any adverse effects on him. Clad in his bodysuit, black cargo pants, and boots, Naruto stayed where he had been for the past hour as he waited for his teammates to arrive. Standing up and leaning back against the wall behind him, his arms crossed over his chest and head tilted down. It had only been a power nap, at most, but the short bit of sleep he got out of it was enough to make up for his lack of rest last night. Thinking back on the memory, Naruto slowly ran the tips of his right index and middle fingers along the scar that now crossed his face. Even after so long, it still burned on occasion, but he knew it to be phantom pains, having suffered some nerve damage from the injury. He had absolutely no feeling along the scar's length, the plasma blade of the Zealot's energy sword having burned them away almost immediately. Because of the glancing blow and burned nerves, Naruto had felt only about half as much pain, if not a bit less, than what he should have felt considering the weapon he had been injured with. It was, possibly, the only good thing about being wounded by a Covenant energy sword. "There he is!" A familiar voice called out from further down the road, snapping Naruto out of his thoughts as his eyes jumped up from the ground in front of him to the source. As excited and energetic as ever, Ruby was lightly jogging along the sidewalk in his direction, a beaming grin on her face as she waved to the veteran soldier. Following behind her were the three other members of Team RWBYN. "Naruto! You showed up." "Of course I did. Why wouldn't I?" Naruto questioned in return as he pushed away from the wall, the group of 4 girls coming to a stop in front of him. Even as the words left his mouth, Naruto casually put his hands behind his back, his forearms lightly pressing into his lower back with his hands kept at his elbows. His right hand was unnoticeably clenched rather tight in comparison to his loosely closed left hand, resisting the all too familiar itch for a gun to shoot. Little did he realize, he was falling prey to the not-so-noticeable and subtle side of post-traumatic stress, something even a Spartan could fall victim to. "It's just, you never came back last night," Yang remarked, catching Naruto's attention. "What were you doing all night?" "Testing some new upgrades I'd been installing into my armor," Naruto responded as calmly and stoically as always, resorting to a half-truth to keep the 4 girls from learning of his occasional white fang hunts. "Now, Ruby, you said something about us having fun today? Just what did you have in mind?" "It's a surprise," the youngest of the group chirped in response, still grinning broadly at the Spartan. Chapter 5. "This is what you had in mind?" Naruto rhetorically asked of their team leader from the back of the group. Despite his usual stoicism and ever-unchanging facial expression, Naruto was actually caught between mild disinterest like Blake, slight annoyance about having to walk almost 2 miles to reach their current location just as Weiss was, and a hint of uncertainty. He wasn't a fan of large crowds. "Oh, come on, Naruto!" Yang piped up with a grin on her face as she turned to face her fellow blonde. "Don't be such a sourpuss. It'll be fun. I do not like crowds." Naruto returned flatly, the buxom blonde girl's reassurances doing nothing to change his opinion on the matter at hand. "Neither do I," Blake commented from off to the side. "You dragged us halfway across Vale," Weiss began slowly as she closed her eyes and took a deep breath to calm herself down. "It wasn't working. For a stupid little fair? Hey! It is not stupid." Ruby shot back before crossing her arms over her chest and turning part ways away from the Schneeris, pouting childishly. "And it's not a fair, it's a fundraiser." "A fundraiser?" Blake inquired with a touch of curiosity. "What for?" "Signal Academy sponsors and hosts events like this 2 or 3 times a year," Yang answered in her younger half-sister's stead. "The money they raise goes towards helping some of their less fortunate students with paying their tuition fees, help fund some of the Academy's extracurricular activities and classes, and even help some of their students get a hold of certain parts for their weapons that they normally wouldn't be able to get." "Really?" Weiss spoke up softly with sincere astonishment and interest. She then frowned slightly. "Guardian Academy never did anything like that back in Atlas. You either had your family's financial backing to supply you with what you needed, or you were left to fend for yourself. Everything comes at a price." Naruto commented idly, mostly just thinking out loud, but it drew the Schnee's focus onto him. Before either could say anything, they were interrupted. "Oh! They're giving out free cookies over there," Ruby suddenly cried out before taking off with the intent to get as many of them as she could. Smirking slightly, Blake rolled her eyes at Ruby's childlike behavior as she started wandering off herself, having caught the scent of a food vendor selling fish nearby. "And that's why Dad forbid any kind of sweets in the house," Yang remarked, joking from beside Naruto, as they watched the youngest member of their team rush straight for the baked goods stand giving out the cookies while Weiss started walking away in search of something that might interest her. I'll keep that in mind. Naruto responded slowly, not really knowing how to properly react to the comment. That was when something caught the Spartan's attention and mild curiosity. It was one of the many attractions that made up the entertainment portion of Signal Academy's fundraiser, a shooting gallery game, to be specific. Noticing how Naruto was now staring off to the side, Yang followed his line of sight before spotting the game stand herself. And you said you wouldn't find anything here that you'd like? The blonde girl commented while glancing up at Naruto's face out of the corner of her eye, smirking. I do not remember saying that, Naruto pointed out with a slightly raised eyebrow. You didn't, but you were thinking it. Now get going. I'm going to go check out what some of the vendors are selling this year. I usually get a cute little souvenir whenever me and Ruby come to these things. Yang responded with one of her trademark flirty grins as she started backing away from the towering titan of a teenager that was her teammate. Oh, and Naruto? Remember to have fun while we're here, okay? HN. Naruto grunted out throatily, yet quietly, as he turned and started walking away as well. Nonetheless, a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he gave Yang a slight wave over his shoulder. I make no promises. Oh, I am so jealous of you right now, Blake. Yang thought to herself, pouting childishly in her head while smirking slightly on the outside as she watched Naruto wade through the dense crowd of patrons that choked the pathways and spaces between the fundraiser's many tents, stalls, stands, and gazebos that littered the grounds of one of Vale's parks. Finally turning around after losing sight of her fellow blonde, Yang began her search for a suitable memento to symbolize Team RWBYN's first little outing together. I want to sleep in those strong arms too, XXX. For the first time in a year, 15-year-old Naomi Namikaze found herself smiling out of genuine happiness. It was only the second fundraiser she'd attended since she had enrolled into Signal Academy 2 years ago, but Naomi had a strange gut feeling that something was going to happen that day. It wasn't exactly a bad feeling, but it still didn't quite feel like a wholly good one either. Standing at about 6'4", the almost freakishly tall girl dismissed it as her nerves making her jittery and paranoid. The first time she had gone to one of Signal's fundraisers, Naomi had gone with her family just a couple months before that day. She hadn't been to one since, doing her best to bury her pain and grief under her training and studies. Shen even intended to go to the current one, but that was when she had gotten that weird gut feeling about it. Plus, she'd been personally invited by a rather cute boy she liked that wasn't the slightest bit bothered about her being so unusually tall. Her family's semblance was to blame for that particular glaring trait. Her parents had called it Hoplite's Shield, something that was mostly a passive body-enhancing ability that naturally developed over time, usually starting around the time they would hit puberty. Primarily, it enhanced their muscles to their full potential, made their bones incredibly strong, and even enhanced their internal organs and biology. It wasn't exactly a bad thing, but the price was them growing really tall. From what she understood about it, her family's semblance dated as far back as the earliest forms of known recorded history. Supposedly, it was a somewhat common semblance among several different ancestral bloodlines back then due to the rather primitive and harsh environment people had to survive in. But as the centuries began to pass, Hoplite's Shield started showing up less and less people as advancements in technology allowed them to make safer settlements, which eventually led to remnants for kingdoms. Eventually, the semblance thinned out quite drastically over the past couple centuries until only a small number of people in the world carried the gene for it. Naomi still thought it was a little weird when she found out that her parents were very distantly related, though it explained how they both had the Hoplite's Shield semblance. From what her parents had told her in the past, it had been entirely random and coincidental that they had met, both shocked beyond belief to find someone else that had the same semblance as them. Since they both carried the genes for the body-enhancing semblance, and thick enough blood for it to fully awaken in either of them, the Hoplite's Shield had been successfully passed on to her and her brother. Naomi? Is something wrong? Naomi's crush/date questioned worriedly from beside her, having noticed the odd look on her face. Being quite tall himself, Ryan Osiros was a rhinofaunus that stood at 6'5" with a 6-inch rhinoceros horn jutting out of his forehead from just below his hairline. Huh. Oh, and no, I was just, Naomi stammered slightly before trailing off towards the end, trying her best to keep from crying and succeeding for the most part. I was just thinking about my brother. That's all. They never found him, did they? Ryan asked hesitantly and quietly, not wanting to unintentionally upset the one girl that didn't care that he was a faunus or even mind the light gray horns sticking out of his forehead. As an added bonus, he thought Naomi was one of the most beautiful girls, both in mind and body, that he had ever had the privilege of meeting and getting to know. Naomi had slightly shaggy/spiky blood-red hair that she kept styled in a pixie undershave, with the hair on top of her head being just long enough to completely cover her left eye, stopping an inch or two past her left cheekbone. Cutting through her scarlet bangs was a single solid streak of naturally occurring golden blonde hair. She knew better, but Naomi liked to believe that it was a part of her brother living on through her. Her silky smooth skin had a healthy bronze coloring to it from constantly being out in the sun, something that only accented her vibrant crimson and gold hair while greatly enhancing the beauty of Ryan's favorite feature about her, Naomi's startlingly bright cyan blue eyes that bore thin rings of dark blue around her pupils and along the outer edges of her irises. Currently dressed in some casual clothes for once, Naomi was clad in a pair of black and gray camouflage cargo capri pants with bright bubblegum pink stitching along all of the seams, a black body-hugging tank top that left a sliver of her trim midriff exposed with a bubblegum pink stylized hurricane decorating the back of the top, simple black sneakers with bright pink anklet socks on her feet, and black fingerless leather gloves on her hands. No, they didn't, Naomi answered softly as Signal Academy's two biggest heavy hitters ducked into a narrow and so far untrafficked pathway between two large tents. Despite her lean Amazonian feminine muscular build, imposing stature, and punkish fashion sense, Naomi was actually a kind-hearted and gentle-souled girl towards her friends, her family, prior to their deaths. But what if he's still alive, Ryan? If he is, then why hasn't he come home? Why hasn't he tried to at least contact me and let me know that he's okay? Naomi, please calm down, Ryan urged softly while gently gripping Naomi's upper arms with her large hands, her naturally diamond-hard muscles contrasting heavily her warm and velvet-soft skin. He pushed aside those thoughts for another more appropriate time. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm sorry. I know you didn't, Ryan. I'm sorry for freaking out. Naomi apologized in return, taking a brief moment to dry the few tears that had welled up in her eyes. It's just I really miss him, Ryan. He was always looking out for me and taking care of me whenever Mom and Dad were out on missions or something. He sounds like he was a really good brother to you, Ryan admitted softly with a slight smile. I wish I could have met him. I wish you could have met him, too. Naomi agreed with a small, though sad smile of her own. You two would have been really good friends. It was in that moment that Naomi idly decided to glance over the rhino faunus she was with. Broad in both his chest and his shoulders, Ryan had a moderately thick muscular build and light caramel-colored skin. He had short and messy snow-white hair while his eyes were a golden amber color, a common trait among most faunus. As he usually was, Ryan was wearing a pair of baggy dark brown pants held up with a black leather belt and the leggings tucked into his black knee-high combat boots. Light gray armor plates were strapped over his thighs with black leather belts while similar plates covered the shins, heels, toes, and tops of his boots. His upper body was clothed with a black skin-tight Under Armour turtleneck top and a dark brown tactical flak vest over it that had light gray armor plates covering most of it. A light gray cloth hood was attached to the vest's collar, and large bulky supply pouches set along his lower back. His hands and forearms were encased with fingerless dark brown leather gauntlets that were covered with more light gray armor plates. Left hanging around his neck for the moment was a dark brown cloth face mask with light gray armor plating on it, while a pair of black framed goggles hung from his right hip. Set at an angle across his back was his devastatingly powerful and very heavy long-shafted battle hammer that bore a semicircular axe blade on the back of the hammer's head. A number of tiny holes littering the sides and top of the weapon's business, and the 150-pound brutish weapon was Ryan's dust-propelled battle hammer, a weapon of his own design that he affectionately called Earthbreaker. Well, now that he's finally been brought up in a conversation, why don't you tell me a little about your brother? Ryan requested a little curiously, since Naomi had never really talked about her family, her brother especially, since the accident. Almost immediately, the red and gold-haired girl looked rather uncertain and a little more than slightly nervous, still being pretty emotional at the moment. His curiosity faltered a second later. If you don't want to talk about him, we don't. And no, Ryan, I do have to do this, Naomi interrupted, crossing her leanly solid arms over her still blooming large B-cup, small C-cup bust. As she leaned back again, a suitably sturdy support beam for one of the tents on either side of them, Naomi closed her eyes and bowed her head slightly, a couple tears escaping her grasp and gliding down her cheeks as she did. I can't keep clinging to false hopes. I need to accept that my big B brother W won't ever be coming back home. Come on. Let's sit down, and you can tell me all about him, Ryan suggested as he led the now teary-eyed Naomi over to a nearby bench to sit down, setting his Earthbreaker hammer down beside it. Nodding weakly and hesitantly, Naomi did as her friend wanted, sniffling quite a bit, and doing her absolute best not to break down completely. Thank you. Now, what's his name? I don't think you've ever told me what it was. His Naomi trailed off and stayed silent for several seconds as she tried calming down a little more. His name was Naruto Namikaze. He's older than me by about 2.5 years at least. He used to be. He's 17 right now, a few months away from turning 18, actually. Oh, so he's almost 3 years older than you? Wow, Ryan commented idly. So, did he wear armor like you or your parents used to? He wore armor, but Naruto was just like our dad, a natural genius when it came to technology, and he loved to tinker. Our dad came up with the idea for our armor suits and built his own, our mom's, and mine, but not my brother's. The soul Namikaze answered softly, finally calm enough to keep herself from stuttering, hyperventilating, or freaking out in general. No, my big brother was unique. While Dad had balanced out our suits' weight-to-strength ratio so that our armor actually made us stronger and faster with moderate protection, Naruto had built his own armor specifically for heavy combat. He had designed it to take the brunt of most enemy attacks with minimal damage to the suit before crushing the opposition as swiftly and heavily as possible. You mean to tell me that your brother took a suit of highly advanced power armor and made it stronger? The rhino faunus exclaimed in shock. He knew how strong Naomi's suit made her. It made her more than strong enough to beat him in single combat. Just Naomi's power, when wearing her armor, honestly scared the shit out of him. He did even want to imagine the raw, devastating power her brother had possessed with his super armor. That was my brother, always tinkering with something, trying to make it better. He definitely took after Dad more than anything, Naomi responded, even letting out a couple weak giggles at a funny memory before sighing tiredly. My brother's suit, Olympus, was designed and built primarily for defense. More armor covering more of his body. Heavier and more durable metals replaced the original metal composite our dad used for our suits. A stronger energy shield with a slightly weaker secondary auxiliary shield. The most advanced sensors and telecommunication technology he could find. He always went above and beyond overkill when he built his suit. I've got a feeling that there's a really big but coming up, Ryan remarked idly, knowing that everything had a downside to it. Seeing his uneasiness in her crush's body language, Naomi couldn't resist the small giggle that escaped her. You're right. There was a price to him upgrading his suit so heavily. Naruto had scrapped a few of the original systems our dad had come up with and replaced them with entirely different ones. He sacrificed almost half of his suit's original potential in mobility and speed for more armor plating, more advanced and more powerful strength amplification systems, and a high-powered internal computer system built directly into the suit to autonomously operate certain systems like the sensor array and whatever else he had built into it. Naomi explained to the faunus beside her. His suit was so heavily armored that it weighed almost 50% more than mine or our parents' armor did. Where our armor weighed somewhere between 700 and 900 pounds, my brother's armor weighed in at about 1,500 pounds. Despite being so heavy and slow, my brother was virtually unstoppable once he started moving. 1,500 pounds? Ryan cried out in disbelief, his eyes wide with absolute shock. There's just no way he could possibly move, let alone fight while wearing 3/4 of a ton of soiled metal. Are you finished? Naomi asked teasingly with another giggle. The normally calm and collected faunus could only stammer unintelligibly for a moment before starting to pout childishly, his cheeks flushed with an indignant blush as he stubbornly glared off to the side. She couldn't help it, she started laughing. Hearing Naomi laugh, Ryan suddenly forgot about why he was upset, the girl's laughter being quite pleasant sounding to the rhino faunus's ears. He couldn't resist smiling fondly at Naomi as she kept laughing. At least she wasn't crying anymore. XXX, another victory for our mighty champion. Someone called out over the drone of the crowd, catching Naruto's attention as he left the third shooting gallery game he'd gone to and beat their previous high scores. Do we have another challenger? Challenger? The Spartan mumbled under his breath while wading through the crowd to find out what was going on. It didn't take long for him to find the source. Seated at a small table was a heavily muscled man, while a much smaller man stood atop a stump. From the looks of a few guys holding their arms, Naruto guessed it was an arm wrestling contest. Before he knew it, he was being singled out. You there? You look like you could give Heracles here a good match. The little man called out, pointing directly at Naruto. Feeling a little confused, the towering blonde glanced to either side of him before looking back to the short announcer and pointing at himself with a raised eyebrow. Yes, you. Now get over here. I'm not responsible for any broken bones. Naruto mumbled just loud enough for those around him to hear as he stepped forward and took a seat across from the one named Heracles. You break my bones? The burly man parroted with a grin before laughing heartily. Naruto could tell the man stood a good 3 inches taller than himself. I don't think it'll be my bones that get broken here today, kid. Naruto merely narrowed his eyes at the kid remark. A moment later, there was a rather loud thud as his right elbow connected with the table, still glaring at the larger man as the cold fires of his past burned in his dark blue irises. You going to keep talking trash or are we going to do this? Heh. Eager for a defeat, aren't you? Heracles retorted smugly as he set his own right arm on the table. As the two gripped one another's hand, the short announcer raised one hand up in the air. What's your name, kid? Are both contestants ready? He called out. Naruto's eyes narrowed ever so slightly more before they both nodded to the announcer. Naruto Uzumaki. The blonde grunted out before the announcer chopped his hand down. Begin! The little man cried. Smirking smugly still, Heracles wanted to make an example of Naruto and put a good bit of his strength behind his initial move, but Naruto's hand didn't so much as budge nor did the blonde bat an eyelash. Heracles' eyes widened in shock when he realized that his opponent wasn't moving in the slightest. Don't ever, Naruto growled out just quiet enough for the larger man to hear him before forcing Heracles' arm further and further back. Arm shaking slightly and gritting his teeth, Heracles couldn't help looking from their conjoined hands to Naruto's cold, unflinching stare. Call me kid. Wham! What a shocker! Heracles has been defeated. The announcer cried after a couple seconds of silence. Feeling his fame slipping from him, Heracles resorted to the words of a desperate loser. He cheated. He had to. The man declared before jumping to his feet. I demand a rematch. Thump. Naruto didn't so much as blink as he set his arm back on the table. He was mad now. Little did he know, there was someone in the crowd staring at the blonde as if they had just seen a ghost. Naomi? What's wrong? Ryan questioned from beside the red and gold-haired girl before following her line of sight. That's Naruto, she whispered, sounding as if she couldn't believe her own eyes. You mean that's your brother? Ryan reiterated, partly out of shock and partly out of hesitance. Naruto didn't exactly have a friendly appeal to him. I don't know. I mean, he looks almost exactly like him, but Naomi hesitated herself, seeing the dark look in her wayward brother's eyes. I don't remember him having that scar on his face, and he never seemed so brutal before. No one calls me a cheater, and walks away unharmed. Naruto growled quietly just as the announcer started their second match. Heracles barely had time for his eyes to widen at the implications of the remark before the blonde-haired towering teen gripped his hand tight enough for people to hear an audible crack. In that same instant, he put enough strength into his arm to not only slam Heracles' hand down on the table in the blink of an eye, but also smash the table to splinters and send Heracles to the ground. The bigger man let out a brief strangled cry of pain as he clutched his hand and wrist to his chest, both having obviously been injured, while Naruto calmly stood up and started walking away. The crowd parted without resistance to let him pass while the announcer rushed to check on his moneymaker as he left. However, Naruto got a strange feeling and glanced off to the side. Spotting a red-haired girl that was a little shorter than himself, Naruto felt a sudden nagging sensation in the back of his mind, almost as if he should know who she was, but couldn't. Ignoring it, he looked forward again and kept walking. Should we go after him? Ryan asked, but Naomi didn't respond. She was rooted to her spot. He doesn't recognize me, she murmured quietly in Heartache, her eyes glued to the retreating form of her brother. Fall back. The troop commander ordered urgently over the comlink, a Covenant CSS cruiser hovering overhead as it charged up its main vertically oriented energy beam. Sierra 419 could only stare up at it for a couple seconds. Their glass in the place. NGH. Naruto grunted as he held his head with one hand while stumbling down an untrafficked pathway once he was out of sight, trying to get away from the crowd and to somewhere isolated. That nagging sensation had exploded into a sharp pain in his head, forcing old memories to the surface of his mind along with generating memories that he'd never had before. So you exchanged the speed amplification motors for better weight stabilizers and stronger shock absorbers? A blonde-haired man inquired curiously before giving him a small look of pride. Nice, but how are you going to keep up with faster opponents? I won't have to. Naruto answered calmly. That's why I have Brunhilde. Stop, Naruto hissed out quietly. Get out of my head. Naruto. What's wrong? Kurama questioned with worry from her spot on his left arm, her DC chip flickering in time with her words. Naruto didn't answer as another flash of memory blitzed through his mind. Incoming. One of the ODSTs in the area called out just moments before several plasma projectiles from Covenant wraiths slammed into the surrounding area. Sierra 419 didn't even flinch as he smashed through a concrete wall with a shoulder charge. One of the massive energy blasts crashing through the second floor of the small building the lone Spartan 6 had charged through. Then there was another immediately after. Spartans never die. Isn't that right, Naruto? Lieutenant Sakura wheezed out with a wry smirk despite her collapsed lung, having been hit by a metal crate that had been sent flying by a hunter's cannon fire. Sierra 419 didn't know how to react as he stared at the one person that had been with him since the beginning. Seeing something behind him, Sakura pushed away from the wall she was leaning against and pushed the heavily armored Spartan with everything she had. Stumbling back more out of surprise than anything, Sierra 419 could only watch as Sakura sealed the blast doors between them, smiling at him through the closing gap even as the baleful green energy of a hunter's plasma cannon smashed into her. Let's keep it that way. She shouted at him just before the doors slammed shut. Gah! Naruto gasped out from both psychological pain and from tripping over his own feet, falling to his hands and knees. Holding his head with a hand again, the blonde felt another foreign memory forcing its way into his head. As Sakura, alright, gear up, son. We're almost to the drop point. A female Spartan clad in a suit of copperhead armor instructed as she checked her twin submachine guns. Another Spartan, dressed in black and gray hunter armor, nudged his arm reassuringly as they grabbed their battle rifle. Chin up, son. This may be your final test, but we'll be nearby just in case things get to be too much for you, the hunter Spartan remarked, getting a scoff from the copperhead Spartan. Stop treating him like a little kid, Minato. The woman scolded lightly. This is just a proper field test for his armor, not a battle. He can take care of himself. Naruto. Kurama called out to him again, but Naruto didn't react. Forcing himself back to his feet, Naruto started walking again, only for it to turn to jogging before gradually working its way up to a full-blown run. He didn't know where he was going and he didn't care. He just needed to get away from everyone, find a place that was quiet and isolated. Naruto? Weiss murmured to herself as she watched the blonde run past her at astounding speeds, but it was the pained look on his face that caught her worry. Not even thinking to contact the others, Weiss immediately gave chase. It didn't take her long to realize that she wasn't going to be able to keep up like she was. Thus, she started using her glyphs to at least keep Naruto in her sight as she raced after him. She could only imagine what it was that was hurting the soldier-like blonde so much. Triple X, what the hell is going on with you, Naruto? Kurama demanded from her spot, powerless to stop the Spartan and incapable of helping him with whatever it was that was afflicting him. Why'd you break that man's hand? Why are you running? Don't you think you overdid it a bit with all of the armor plating, bro? A red and blonde-haired girl questioned from off to the side as he finished equipping the last of his Olympus suit, his helmet left hanging at his left hip. Who was that girl? Why'd she look so familiar? There were only a few of the questions flying around in his hurting head like a hurricane as he kept running. What the fuck is happening to me? Without noticing it, he ran across a busy street, finally looking to the side at the sound of a horn just in time to see the car that was a split second after from hitting him. Reflexively reacting to it, Naruto kicked off the ground slightly and tilted his right shoulder down, tucking his head down with his left hand covering the back of his head, and his right covering Kurama. Naruto! Wise screamed with wide, fearful eyes as she watched Naruto get hit by a car, watching as his black-clad form tumbled over the top of the vehicle and hit the ground while the car swerved to a sudden halt immediately after. Despite her exhaustion from chasing the incredibly fast blonde for nearly 2 miles so far, Weiss pushed herself to move faster than ever before, rushing to her teammate's side. NGH grunting quietly, Naruto slowly pushed himself up to his hands and knees, his ears ringing and body aching, feeling as if he had just been smashed through a wall by a charging hunter. Something he'd experienced once before. Blinking slowly, Naruto simply stared at the ground numbly as a couple drops of blood dripped from a cut above his right eye. Forcing himself to his feet, Naruto stumbled dizzily, disoriented and unbalanced after the impact. Hey, are you okay? The driver that had hit him asked frantically, caught between looking at the towering blonde he just hit and the damage done to their car. The windshield was completely smashed in, the front bumper and hood heavily dented along with the roof. It looked almost as if it had been hit by another car. Naruto! Weiss yelled out once more before coming a stop beside the hunched-over blonde, looking him over worriedly for any serious injuries. Are you okay? Is anything broken? Oh my god! You're bleeding. I think you should call an ambulance. Naruto almost slurred numbly, his vision blurring and steadily growing darker. I think I'm about to pass out. What? Weiss asked in confusion before Naruto tipped forward, barely managing to catch the blonde before he could fall completely, but he was too heavy for her and only knocked her down with him. Naruto? Naruto! Wake up! Thankfully, she could hear the wailing siren of an ambulance in the distance, a bystander having obviously called for help. What if Godlike Naruto is Blake's brother? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.